In the pristine silence of Seattle's most exclusive martial arts dojo, where membership costs more than most people's annual salary, billionaire master Lena Hartley has never met anyone she couldn't break. But tonight, watching a tired janitor mop her floors with the same calm precision she applies to destroying opponents, something impossible happens. He meets her legendary strike with empty air, flowing around her attack like water around stone. For the first time in 15 years, the untouchable 8th Dan Master feels what her students have always felt: powerless. If you want to see how a man with nothing teaches a woman who has everything what true strength really means, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The sound of Lena Hartley's fist cutting through air was supposed to be the last sound her opponents heard before impact. Sharp, precise, inevitable. She'd perfected that sound over 23 years of training across 4 continents, under masters who made grown men weep. The whisper of her knuckles through empty space had become her signature, a promise kept in less than a second. Tonight, that sound meant nothing. The janitor didn't even look up. Lena stood in the center of her dojo, the vast space gleaming under recessed lighting that cost more than a luxury sedan. Every surface reflected her empire back at her: the hand-carved Japanese maple walls, the competition-grade mats that had hosted national champions, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's glittering skyline. This was the Hartley Institute for Advanced Martial Arts, and it was hers. Every inch of it. Every student who trained here paid $25,000 a year for the privilege of learning from her. Most of them never made it past the first month. And yet, here was this man, this nobody in a janitor's uniform, pushing a mop across her floors with the steady rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before and would do it 1,000 times again. "Excuse me," Lena said. Her voice carried the same precision as her strikes, clear, controlled, impossible to ignore. The janitor paused. He looked up slowly, and Lena found herself studying a face that didn't match the uniform. Mid-30s, she guessed, strong jaw, eyes that held exhaustion, and something else, something that looked almost like peace. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar. His hands, wrapped around the mop handle, were scarred in ways that told stories. "Yes, ma'am." His voice was quiet, respectful, but not submissive. There was a difference, and Lena noticed. "You're new." It wasn't a question. "Started last week, evening maintenance. I was told you close at 9, so I usually come in after." He glanced at the clock on the wall, 8:47 p.m. "I didn't realize anyone would still be here." Lena felt something stir in her chest. Irritation, maybe? Or was it curiosity? She'd trained herself not to feel curious about people anymore. Curiosity led to attachment, and attachment led to weakness. She'd learned that lesson early, and she'd learned it thoroughly. "What's your name?" "Evan Brooks, ma'am." "Well, Evan Brooks, do you know who I am?" Something flickered across his face. Was it amusement? "Yes, ma'am. You're Lena Hartley, 8th Dan Black Belt, 3-time world champion, youngest female master in the American Martial Arts Federation's history." He paused. "Also my employer, technically." "Technically," Lena repeated. She took a step closer, her bare feet silent on the mat. She was still in her training gi, the fabric crisp and white, tied with a black belt so worn it had gone gray at the edges. "You know what an 8th Dan is?" "I have some idea." Some idea. Lena felt her jaw tighten. All day she'd been teaching students who treated her like a deity, who bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched the mat, who whispered her name with reverence in the locker rooms. And here was this janitor, this man who cleaned her floors, speaking to her like she was just another person. "It means I've spent my entire adult life perfecting something most people can't even begin to understand. It means I can break bones without thinking about it. It means I am one of less than 200 people in this country who has earned this rank." Evan nodded slowly. "That's impressive, ma'am." The words were right, but the tone was wrong. There was no awe in it, no fear, just a simple acknowledgement, like she'd told him she had a college degree or owned a nice car. "Are you mocking me, Mr. Brooks?" "No, ma'am." He looked genuinely surprised. "I apologize if it came across that way." Lena studied him. She'd made a career out of reading people, of seeing the microsecond tells that revealed intention before action. But this man was still as water. His breathing was even. His shoulders were relaxed. His eyes held hers without challenge, but also without submission. It was infuriating. "Have you ever trained?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "A little, here and there." "Here and there," Lena repeated. She was aware that she was being petty now, needling this man who'd done nothing wrong except fail to be impressed by her, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. All evening, she'd been working through forms, trying to perfect a technique that should have been perfect a decade ago. She was tired, frustrated, and this man's calm was like sandpaper against her nerves. "What style?" she asked. "Nothing formal, just things I picked up." "Things you picked up?" Lena felt a smile that wasn't really a smile touch her lips. "Would you like to pick up something else?" Evan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Ma'am?" "Spar with me." The words hung in the air between them. Lena watched his face, waiting for the fear, the nervous laughter, the stammered excuse. Instead, Evan just looked at her with that same impossible calm. "I don't think that's a good idea," he said quietly. "Afraid you'll get hurt?" "No, ma'am." He set the mop carefully against the wall. "Afraid I'll lose my job." "I own this place, Mr. Brooks. I decide who gets fired. And right now, I'm telling you I want to see what you can do with those things you picked up here and there." She gestured to the center mat. "Unless you'd like to decline a direct request from your employer." It was manipulation, and they both knew it. Lena felt a flicker of shame, but she pushed it away. She wanted this, needed this. Some release for the pressure that had been building in her chest all day, all week, maybe for years. Evan looked at her for a long moment. Then he glanced toward the corner of the dojo where she now noticed a backpack sat against the wall. How had she missed that before? "Caleb," he said softly. "Come here, buddy." Lena's head snapped toward the corner. A child emerged from behind a support pillar. A boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with his father's dark hair and serious eyes. He'd been sitting there the entire time, and she hadn't seen him, hadn't heard him. The realization sent a small shock through her system. She prided herself on situational awareness. The boy walked over to his father with a sketchbook clutched against his chest. He looked at Lena without fear, but also without the usual curiosity children showed around strangers. "This is my son, Caleb," Evan said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "He comes with me when I work nights. Caleb, this is Ms. Hartley." "Hi," the boy said simply. Lena nodded at him, then turned back to Evan. "So?" Evan looked down at his son. "Go sit on the bench over there, okay? And keep drawing. I'll just be a few minutes." Caleb nodded and walked to the bench that ran along the far wall. He climbed up, settled his sketchbook on his lap, and went back to whatever he'd been working on, apparently unconcerned that his father was about to spar with a woman who could hospitalize most trained fighters. Evan turned back to Lena. He was still in his maintenance uniform, dark blue work pants and a matching shirt with Brooks embroidered on the chest. He kicked off his work boots, revealing white socks that had seen better days. "Any rules?" he asked. Lena felt her heartbeat quicken. This was what she wanted. This moment of clarity before engagement, when everything else fell away and there was only the mat and the opponent. Light contact, no strikes to the face or groin. First person to achieve a dominant position or force a tap out wins. All right. They moved to the center of the mat. Lena fell into her ready stance automatically. Left foot forward, weight evenly distributed, hands up but relaxed, breathing controlled. 23 years of muscle memory made her body into a weapon without conscious thought. Evan just stood there, not slouching, but not in any recognizable fighting stance either. His hands were at his sides. His feet were shoulder-width apart. He looked like he was waiting for a bus. "You need to," Lena started to say, then stopped herself. Fine. If he wanted to get taken down immediately, that was his problem. She moved. The technique was a feint high, followed by a sweep low. A basic combination she'd used to take down opponents twice her size. Her lead hand flashed toward his face, drawing his attention up, while her back leg swept toward his ankle with enough force to send him hard to the mat. Her hand cut through empty air, Her legs swept through space where his ankle had been a microsecond earlier, and Evan was standing 3 feet to her left, still in that same non-stance, looking at her with what might have been concern. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Lena felt heat rush to her face. She'd missed. That was impossible. She never missed. Not on basic techniques. Not on techniques she could execute in her sleep. "Again," she said, her voice tight. This time, she didn't faint. She went straight in with a clean combination: jab, cross, roundhouse kick to the midsection. Fast, precise, textbook perfect. Evan moved like smoke. He wasn't fast, exactly. Fast implied effort, acceleration, force. He just wasn't there when her strikes arrived. Her jab found air. Her cross whistled past his shoulder. Her kick swept through the space where his ribs should have been, and she had to catch herself from overextending. She spun back to face him, breathing harder now. He was still in that same relaxed posture, watching her with those calm eyes. "You're holding back," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't." "Ma'am, I don't think so. I said don't hold back." The words came out louder than she'd intended, echoing in the empty dojo. From his bench, Caleb looked up from his drawing, but didn't seem alarmed. Evan's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Not a fighting stance. Still, nothing she recognized. But there was a quality of attention now, like the surface of a still pond right before a stone breaks through. Lena attacked with everything she had. For the next 90 seconds, she threw every technique in her arsenal at him. Strikes, kicks, takedowns, grappling attempts, combinations that had won her championships. She moved with the speed and precision that had made her legendary, that had earned her a rank only a handful of people in the country could claim. And Evan Brooks, janitor, moved around her like water flowing around stones. He never blocked. Blocking meant force meeting force, impact, resistance. Instead, he simply wasn't where her techniques landed. When she tried to grab him, his sleeve slipped through her fingers like silk. When she aimed a kick at his knee, he'd already shifted his weight, turning the target into empty space. When she shot for a takedown, he melted backward and she found herself grasping air, and he never attacked back. Finally, gasping for breath, Lena stopped. Sweat ran down her face despite the dojo's perfect climate control. Her GI clung to her shoulders. Her legs trembled slightly from exertion. Evan stood 5 feet away, breathing normally, not a hair out of place. "How?" Lena managed to get the word out between breaths. "How are you doing that?" "Doing what, ma'am?" "Don't." She stopped, forced herself to breathe, to think. "You're trained, seriously trained. What are you? Where did you study?" Evan glanced toward his son, then back at her. "Lots of places. Lots of teachers." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Lena wanted to scream, or hit something, or hit him, except she'd been trying to do that for 90 seconds and had landed exactly 0 strikes. "Why are you working as a janitor if you can move like that?" "Because I needed a job with evening hours so I could have my son with me." Evan's voice remained patient, but there was something underneath it now, something that might have been sadness. "Because the janitorial company doesn't ask questions about gaps in your resume, because I needed to work, and this place was hiring, and I'm good at cleaning." "You could be teaching. You could be competing. Do you have any idea how much money—" "But I know exactly how much money, ma'am." He cut her off gently but firmly. "I've been there. Done that. It wasn't for me." "That's insane." "Maybe." He walked past her to retrieve his mop. "Is there anything else you need? Or can I finish my work?" Lena stared at him. She'd just been comprehensively demonstrated to, not defeated, because he'd never tried to defeat her, but something worse. Dismissed. Made irrelevant. And now he was going back to mopping her floors like nothing had happened. "Who are you?" she asked. Evan paused with the mop handle in his hands. For the first time since she'd spoken to him, something like emotion crossed his face. "Just a guy trying to take care of his kid, Ms. Hartley. That's all. Just a guy." He moved to a different section of the floor and resumed mopping with the same steady rhythm as before. The conversation, apparently, was over. Lena stood in the center of her dojo, her empire, her achievement, her proof to the world that she was exceptional, and felt something she hadn't felt in over a decade. Small. She walked to the bench where Caleb sat drawing and lowered herself onto the wood, her legs still shaky from exertion. The boy didn't look up, absorbed in whatever he was creating. "What are you drawing?" Lena asked. Her voice came out rougher than she'd intended. Caleb held up his sketchbook. The page was filled with fluid lines, figures in motion. She recognized them after a moment. It was her and Evan, but not like any photograph or video would have captured them. He'd drawn movement itself, capturing not the moment of impact, but the space between moments. Her strikes were aggressive slashes of charcoal, all angles and force. Evan's evasions were soft curves, flowing around her aggression like streams around rocks. The drawing showed her something she hadn't been able to see in the moment. She looked angry, desperate, fighting against something rather than for something. Evan looked peaceful, sad even, just making space for her fury until it exhausted itself. "That's remarkable," Lena said quietly. Caleb looked at the drawing, then at her. "My dad says everyone has their own way of moving. He says you can tell a lot about people by how they move." "What can you tell about me?" The boy considered this with a seriousness that seemed too old for his age. "You move like you're trying to prove something." The words hit harder than any physical strike could have. Lena felt something crack in her chest, some armor she'd been wearing so long she'd forgotten it was there. "What about your dad?" she asked. "How does he move?" "Like water. He says water doesn't fight, it just finds the way." Across the dojo, Evan continued mopping, the soft swish of the mop against the floor the only sound in the vast space. Lena watched him work, seeing him differently now. Not as a janitor, not as an opponent, as someone who'd found something she was still searching for. "Your drawing is really good," she said to Caleb. "Thank you." He went back to his sketchbook, adding detail to the flowing lines that represented his father. Lena sat there for a long time, watching Evan work, watching Caleb draw, feeling the sweat cool on her skin and her breathing slowly return to normal. Her dojo had never felt so quiet, or so loud, in the way silence can be loud when it forces you to hear your own thoughts. She'd built everything she had on the principle that mastery meant dominance, that to be the best meant to be untouchable, unreachable, above. She'd sacrificed relationships, friendships, any semblance of a normal life, all in pursuit of perfection. And she'd achieved it. She was perfect. Her techniques were flawless. Her record was impeccable. Her reputation was unmatched. And tonight, a janitor had shown her that perfection without purpose was just empty movement. Finally, she stood. Her legs had stopped shaking. Evan was working his way toward the entrance, nearly finished with the floor. "Mr. Brooks," she called. He stopped and looked at her. "Tomorrow night," she said. "Same time. Would you be willing to teach me?" Evan's expression was unreadable. "Teach you what, ma'am?" "Whatever it is you know that I don't." "I don't think—" "Please." The word felt foreign in her mouth. Lena Hartley didn't say please. She commanded, she instructed, she demanded. But standing here, still sweating from her failed attempts to touch him, feeling more exposed than she'd felt in years, the word came out naturally. Evan looked at his son. Caleb had stopped drawing and was watching them both with those serious eyes. "We'll be here anyway," Caleb said softly. "And you have lots of space." A smile flickered across Evan's face, the first real expression she'd seen from him. "Yeah, we do have lots of space." He looked back at Lena. "All right, tomorrow night. But I'm not a teacher, Ms. Hartley. I can show you some things, but I can't make you understand them." "I'll take that chance." He nodded and returned to his work. Lena gathered her things from her office, her bag, her phone, with its 23 unread messages from students and business contacts. She usually stayed for another hour, reviewing footage of her training, analyzing every movement, searching for imperfections to eliminate. Tonight, she left. As she pushed through the dojo's front entrance into the Seattle night, the cool air hit her face like a revelation. The city sprawled before her, lights reflecting off Puget Sound in the distance, the Space Needle rising above the skyline like a declaration. She'd conquered this city, built her empire here, become a legend here. And tonight, she'd learned she knew nothing. The next day passed like every other day had passed for the last 5 years. Lena taught advanced classes in the morning, students who'd been training for years, who moved with practiced precision through combinations she'd drilled into them 1,000 times. She held business meetings in the afternoon, reviewing expansion plans for a second location in Portland, discussing partnership opportunities with equipment manufacturers. She did interviews with martial arts magazines, provided testimonials for training programs, reviewed applications from prospective students. By evening, she'd taught or spoken to over 60 people, and she couldn't remember a single conversation. At 8:45 p.m., Lena stood in the center of her empty dojo, wearing her training gi, waiting. The silence felt different tonight, expectant. She'd sent her last class home early, told her administrative assistant she was working on new curriculum and didn't want to be disturbed. At 8:53, she heard the sound of the entrance door opening. Footsteps. The squeak of a maintenance cart's wheels. Evan appeared in the doorway, Caleb at his side. He saw her standing there and paused. "Ms. Hartley." "Evan?" She didn't call him Mr. Brooks this time. It felt wrong, formal in a way that missed the point. "Thank you for coming." "We come every night anyway." But he pushed his cart to the side and stepped onto the mat. Caleb headed for his bench with his backpack and sketchbook. Lena felt nervous. The realization startled her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt nervous about training. Nervous before competitions, maybe, years ago. But this was different. This felt like standing at the edge of something vast, about to step off. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be a student anymore." Evan tilted his head slightly. "When did you stop?" The question hit harder than it should have. "When I earned my 5th Dan, I think. Maybe earlier. I became the teacher, the master, the one with the answers." "And how's that working out?" Despite everything, Lena felt herself smile. "Apparently not as well as I thought." "Show me your stance." She fell into position automatically, the same ready stance she'd used for years, perfected through countless hours of training. Weight distributed evenly, center of gravity low, hands positioned for optimal response time to any attack. Evan walked around her slowly, studying. He didn't touch her or adjust her position, just looked. "What do you feel?" he asked. "Feel?" "In your body. Right now, what do you feel?" Lena had to think about it. "Balanced, ready, prepared." Prepared for what? For anything. For an attack from any angle. She stopped. "For a threat." Evan nodded. "You're always ready to fight, even when there's no fight, even when you're alone, even when you're safe." He moved to stand in front of her. "That's exhausting." "It's discipline. It's armor." His voice was gentle but certain. "And armor gets heavy." Lena felt her jaw tighten. "So I should just be weak? Vulnerable?" "No, you should be present." He gestured for her to relax out of her stance. "Try this. Just stand. No position, no preparation. Just stand and feel your body." It felt wrong, undisciplined, sloppy. But Lena forced herself to let go of her perfect stance and just stand naturally, the way she might stand waiting for an elevator or looking out a window. "Now breathe," Evan said. "Not controlled breathing, not counted breathing. Just breathe normally and pay attention to it." She breathed, in, out. Her mind immediately started analyzing her diaphragm engagement, her oxygen intake, her respiratory efficiency. "Stop thinking," Evan said quietly. "Just feel." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do. You knew how when you were a child. Everyone knows how. You've just forgotten." Lena tried. She really tried. But her mind kept racing, kept analyzing, kept trying to turn even this simple act into something she could perfect and control. "This is harder than any technique you ever taught me," she said finally, "because you're trying to do it. You can't do being present. You can only be present." "That doesn't make sense." "I know." Evan smiled slightly. "It won't make sense for a while. That's okay." From his bench, Caleb spoke up. "You're fighting with yourself, Ms. Hartley." Both adults turned to look at him. He was still drawing, not looking up from his sketchbook. "What do you mean?" Lena asked. "In your drawing yesterday, the way you moved, you were fighting with yourself more than with Dad. Like part of you wanted to do one thing, and another part wanted to do something else. Lena walked over to the bench. "Can I see that drawing again?" Caleb held it up. Looking at it now, Lena could see what he meant. There was a fractured quality to the lines representing her movements, as if each strike was arguing with itself about whether it should exist. "I've never thought about it that way," she said slowly. "Most people don't," Evan said. He'd moved to stand beside her, looking at his son's drawing. "We learn techniques. We drill combinations. We practice until our bodies can execute movements without conscious thought. And we think that's mastery. But real mastery isn't about executing movements. It's about becoming movement." "That still doesn't make sense." "It will." He pulled the bench away from the wall, creating an open space. "Caleb, do you want to show Ms. Hartley?" The boy's face lit up. He set down his sketchbook and jumped from the bench. Without any warm-up or preparation, he began to move. It wasn't martial arts, it wasn't dance. It was just a child moving through space, but there was something mesmerizing about it. Caleb moved like he was part of the air itself, flowing and shifting without any apparent effort or thought. He spun, he jumped, he rolled across the mat, and every movement led naturally into the next without break or hesitation. After a minute or so, he stopped, breathing only slightly harder, and smiled at Lena. "He's been doing that since he could walk," Evan said quietly. "I never taught him. He just moves." "It's beautiful," Lena said, and meant it. "That's what you've forgotten," Evan said. "Movement doesn't have to be fighting. It doesn't have to be controlled or perfected or turned into a weapon. Sometimes movement is just joy." Lena felt something painful twist in her chest. When was the last time she'd felt joy in movement? When was the last time she'd trained for anything except improvement, except proving something, except maintaining her status as the best? "I don't know if I can get that back," she said softly. "Then don't try to get it back. Find something new. Something." The session continued for another hour, though calling it a session felt wrong. Evan didn't teach her techniques or combinations. He didn't correct her form or analyze her movements. Instead, he asked questions. He had her move in ways that felt pointless. Walk across the mat slowly, then quickly. Stand on one foot and notice how her body balanced itself without conscious instruction. Throw a punch at half speed and pay attention to all the tiny adjustments her muscles made automatically. It was frustrating and boring and uncomfortable, and Lena couldn't remember the last time training had taught her so much. By the time Evan said they should call it a night, Lena was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Her mind felt scraped raw, exposed to ideas that contradicted everything she'd built her life on. "Same time tomorrow?" Evan asked as he retrieved his cleaning cart. Lena nodded. "If you're willing." "We'll be here." She watched them leave, father and son, janitor and child, two people who seemed more centered and peaceful than anyone she'd met in the elite circles she moved through. The door closed behind them, and Lena was alone again in her pristine, perfect, empty dojo. She walked to the wall of mirrors that ran along one side of the training floor and looked at her reflection. Same face she'd seen every day, same body she'd trained into a weapon, same uniform that proclaimed her mastery to anyone who saw it. But behind her eyes, something had shifted. Some certainty had cracked, and she couldn't unsee what had been revealed in the fracture. Lena thought about Caleb's drawing, about those fractured lines showing her fighting with herself. She thought about Evan's calm as she'd thrown everything she had at him, only to hit nothing but air. She thought about the weight of armor, worn for so long she'd forgotten there was a person underneath it. And for the first time in years, Lena Hartley, 8th, Dan Black Belt, 3-time world champion, youngest female master in the Federation's history, billionaire owner of Seattle's most prestigious martial arts academy, felt something she'd trained herself never to feel. Fear. Not fear of failure, not fear of defeat. Those were simple fears, easily addressed through more training, more discipline, more control. This was the fear of realizing that everything you'd built might be built on a foundation that was never as solid as you believed. The fear of discovering that the thing you'd sacrificed everything to achieve might not be the thing you actually needed. The fear of understanding that the only thing standing between you and what you've been searching for is you. Lena stood before that mirror for 20 minutes after Evan and Caleb left, watching her reflection like it belonged to a stranger. When she finally moved, Her muscles ached in places that had nothing to do with physical training. She changed in her private office, pulled on designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that cost more than Evan probably made in a week, and drove home to her penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay in a car that could have fed a family for a year. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt longer than usual. Her apartment greeted her with the same austere perfection it always did: minimalist furniture in blacks and grays, art on the walls that was expensive but not meaningful, a kitchen so pristine it looked like it had never been used, because it hadn't, mostly. Lena ate prepared meals delivered by a service, protein calculated and macro balanced. She slept 6 hours a night on a mattress recommended by sleep scientists. She lived like an athlete in eternal training for a competition that never came. She poured herself 2 fingers of Japanese whiskey, one of her few indulgences, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city she'd conquered. Seattle glittered below her, all ambition and innovation and wealth. A city that rewarded people like her who were willing to sacrifice everything else for success. Somewhere down there, Evan was probably putting Caleb to bed in whatever small apartment they could afford on a janitor's salary. Reading him a story maybe, tucking him in, doing all the simple, ordinary things that Lena had never done and would never do. She thought about Caleb's drawing again. Those fractured lines, fighting with herself. The whiskey burned going down, but it didn't warm her. The next 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt both strange and increasingly necessary. Days belonged to Lena's regular life, but teaching classes, managing her business, maintaining her reputation as Seattle's most formidable martial arts master. But evenings became something else. At 8:45, she would clear her dojo of students and staff, and at 8:53, Evan and Caleb would arrive. What happened in those hours defied everything Lena had learned about training. Evan never demonstrated techniques, never corrected her form, never pushed her to go harder, faster, better. Instead, he asked impossible questions and gave her exercises that seemed designed to frustrate her. Walk across the mat, he told her one night, but feel every part of your foot as it touches the floor, not as technique, just as sensation. Lena walked, stopped. This is ridiculous. I'm not learning anything. You're learning that you've forgotten how to feel, Evan said calmly. He was sitting on the bench next to Caleb, who was drawing as usual. Your body has become a machine you operate. You've forgotten it's also a thing you live in. That's the same thing. It's not. Another night, he had her stand on one leg with her eyes closed. Not as a balance exercise, just standing, feeling. What's the point of this? Lena demanded after 5 minutes of wobbling. What do you feel? Evan asked instead of answering. Frustrated, stupid, like I'm wasting time. Underneath that, in your body, what do you feel? Lena forced herself to pay attention to actual physical sensation instead of her emotional reaction. My ankle is making constant tiny adjustments. My hip is engaging muscles I don't usually notice. My arms are doing something, I'm not sure what, to help me balance. Right. Your body knows how to balance itself. It's been doing it since you learned to walk, but you don't trust it. You try to control it. Control is discipline. Control is fear. The words hit like a slap. Lena opened her eyes and nearly fell over as her balance shifted. She caught herself, both feet on the ground now, staring at Evan. What did you say? You heard me. His voice was gentle but unwavering. Everything you do comes from fear. Fear of being weak. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of not being perfect. That's not... Lena stopped. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were clenched. Her whole body had gone rigid in defensive response. You don't know me. I know what I see. And I see someone who's spent so long building armor that she's forgotten what she's protecting. Lena wanted to throw him out. Wanted to tell him he was fired, that she didn't need this, that she was fine exactly as she was. But the words wouldn't come. Because standing there in her empty dojo, facing this janitor who moved like water and spoke like he could see through her skin, Lena couldn't lie. I don't know how to be any other way, she said finally. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. Then let's find out together. From the bench, Caleb spoke without looking up from his drawing. It's okay to be scared, Ms. Hartley. Dad says courage isn't not being scared, it's being scared and doing it anyway. Lena looked at the boy, this 8-year-old who seemed to understand things that most adults never figured out. What are you drawing tonight? Caleb held up his sketchbook. The page showed a figure, her, she realized, with layers drawn around it like an onion. Each layer was more rigid, more geometric, more like armor. But at the very center, barely visible, was something soft and curved and organic. That's you, Caleb said. Dad says everyone has a real self and a protected self. The protected self is all the things you show people. The real self is what's underneath. Which one is supposed to be better? Neither. They're both you, but the protected self gets tired from always standing guard. Sometimes it needs to rest. Lena felt her eyes burn. She blinked hard, refusing to let tears come. She hadn't cried in years. Tears were weakness. Tears were loss of control. Tears were human. Can I buy that drawing from you? She asked. Caleb looked surprised. You want it? Yes. You don't have to pay me. I'll give it to you. He carefully tore the page from his sketchbook and held it out. Lena took it like it was something precious. Thank you. You're welcome. That night, after Evan had finished his cleaning and they'd left, Lena didn't go home. She sat on the bench where Caleb always drew, holding his sketch, looking at the layers he'd drawn around that small, soft center. She thought about all the things she'd done to protect herself, the perfect technique, the fearsome reputation, the wealth that kept her separate from people who might want something from her, the control that meant she was never surprised, never vulnerable, never caught off guard. Except she had been caught off guard by a janitor with tired eyes and a way of moving that made her realize she'd been fighting shadows while real strength flowed past her like water around stone. The next evening, Lena did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She called her sister. Lena? Sarah's voice came through with shock and what might have been pleasure. Is everything okay? Yes. I think so. I don't know. Lena paced her office, phone pressed to her ear. Can I ask you something? Of course. When was the last time you saw me happy? Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, what's going on? Just answer the question. Sarah took a breath. Honestly, I can't remember. Not recently. Maybe when you won your 3rd world championship? But even then, you seemed more relieved than happy, like you'd passed a test instead of achieved something you wanted. Why didn't you say anything? I did, multiple times. You told me I didn't understand what it took to be exceptional. That happiness was for people with ordinary ambitions. Lena closed her eyes. She had said that. She remembered saying it, remembered believing it. I was wrong. Lena, what's happening? I met someone who's making me question everything. Oh my God, you're dating someone? What? No, it's not like that. He's just... Lena struggled to find words. He's teaching me things I didn't know I needed to learn. That sounds like dating. Sarah, I'm serious. So am I. Her sister's voice softened. You sound different. More, I don't know. More like you used to sound before you decided to become invincible. I'm not invincible. I know that. Everyone knows that, except you. After they hung up, Lena sat in her office for a long time, thinking about the girl she used to be. Before the training consumed everything, before perfection became more important than joy, before she'd decided that being untouchable was the same as being strong. When Evan and Caleb arrived that evening, Lena was already on the mat, but not in her GI. She was wearing training clothes, leggings, and a tank top, but she wasn't warming up or running through forms. She was just sitting cross-legged, waiting. Different look tonight, Evan observed. I thought maybe the uniform was part of the problem. It makes me feel like I have to be Master Hartley instead of just Lena. Something shifted in Evan's expression. Approval, maybe? Or recognition. All right, what do you want to work on? I want you to teach me to move the way you move. I don't think you never attack, you never force, you just make space. How do I learn that? Evan exchanged a glance with Caleb, who'd settled on his bench with fresh paper. You don't learn it like a technique. It's not something you add to what you already know. It's something you uncover by removing what's in the way. That's cryptic. I know. He stepped onto the mat and gestured for her to stand. Attack me. For real this time, no holding back. Lena rose to her feet. We've done this. Not like this. Before you were trying to prove something. This time, I want you to pay attention to what you feel right before you move. That split second before your body executes the technique. Notice it. Lena set herself and threw a jab. Fast, clean, perfect form. Stop, Evan said. Her fist was inches from his face. He'd barely moved. What did you feel? I don't understand the question. Right before you threw that punch, what did your body feel? I decided to throw a jab, and I threw it. No, before the decision. What told you to decide? Lena lowered her fist, frustrated. Nothing told me. I just chose. Try again. Slower this time, slow enough that you can notice what happens before the choice. She tried, chambered her fist, started to extend it, paying attention to every microsecond of the movement. And there, just before her arm moved, she felt it. A tiny tension, a gathering of intention, a moment where her body prepared itself for action. I felt something, she said slowly, like a tightening. That's your body preparing to force, Evan said. Every technique you know starts with that tension. You gather force and then release it. It's fast, it's effective, but it's effortful. And anyone who's trained can feel it coming. So how do you move without it? You don't move without intention. You just don't gather force first. You move from stillness directly into action with no bridge between. That's impossible. It seems impossible because you've trained your body to always build up before releasing. But watch. Evan stood completely still, totally relaxed. Then his hand was simply touching Lena's shoulder. There had been no wind-up, no preparation, no visible transition between still and moving. His hand was just somewhere else than it had been, and the movement between was so smooth it had been nearly invisible. How did you do that? By not doing it, by letting it happen. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Doing requires effort. Happening just requires permission. Lena wanted to throw something. This was worse than the walking exercises, worse than the standing on one foot, worse than anything. It was like trying to grasp water with her fists. I don't know how to give permission. I know. That's what we're working on. For the next hour, Evan had her practice the simplest movement imaginable, raising her arm. Over and over, he had her lift her arm, but pay attention to that moment of gathering, that tension that preceded action. Every time she felt it, she was supposed to stop, relax, and try again. It was maddening. Every time she tried to move without the tension, nothing happened. Her arm just stayed at her side, heavy and useless. I can't do this, she said finally. My body doesn't work this way. Everyone's body works this way. You've just trained yours not to. Evan moved beside her and raised his own arm slowly, with visible effort. Watch. When I move like you move, I tense first. His shoulder visibly tightened before his arm rose. When I move like water, I allow first. He relaxed completely, and his arm simply floated upward, effortless and smooth. Feel the difference? I see it. I don't know how to do it. Because you're trying to do it. Stop trying. Just imagine your arm floating up, and then get out of the way. Lena closed her eyes, imagined her arm rising, and thought about getting out of the way, about not forcing, not controlling, not making it happen through will and discipline. Her arm twitched, lifted an inch, fell back. There, Evan's voice held excitement. Did you feel that? That tiny moment where it moved without effort? It barely moved at all. But it moved. That's the beginning. That's what you build from. Caleb spoke up from his bench. It's like when you're falling asleep. You can't make yourself fall asleep. You have to let yourself fall asleep. Exactly, Evan said. Every night you practice letting go of control. You just don't realize you're practicing it. Lena opened her eyes and looked at her arm like it belonged to someone else. She'd spent 23 years training this body to respond to her commands instantly and perfectly. And now she was trying to teach it to move without her commanding it at all. It felt backwards, impossible. But that tiny twitch, that inch of movement that had happened without effort, she'd felt it. For a microsecond, her arm had moved the way Evan moved, flowing instead of forcing. Again, she said. They worked until Evan needed to start his cleaning rounds. By the end of the session, Lena could sometimes raise her arm halfway with that quality of effortless movement. Sometimes. Maybe one time in 10. The other 9 times, she fell back into her old patterns. Gather, tense, force, execute. This is going to take forever, she said, exhausted and frustrated. Probably, Evan agreed. Undoing 20 years of training usually does. Why did you stop? The question came out before Lena could stop it. You said you'd been there, done that. You clearly trained at a very high level. Why did you walk away? Evan was quiet for a long moment. Caleb had stopped drawing and was watching his father with those serious eyes. I didn't walk away, Evan said finally. I fell, and I couldn't get back up, not as the person I'd been. What happened? Life happened, the kind that breaks you down to nothing so you can figure out if there's anything real underneath all the things you thought you were. He glanced at Caleb, and something soft moved across his face. Turns out there was. Just took me a while to find it. But you could come back. You could teach, compete, do all the things you walked away from. You're better than anyone I've ever seen. Better at what? Evan asked. Better at winning? Better at being feared? Better at standing alone at the top of a mountain looking down at everyone else? He shook his head. I spent years chasing that. It didn't make me happy. It didn't make me whole. It just made me lonely. Lena felt those words land in her chest like stones. So you chose mopping floors instead? I chose being present for my son. I chose work that ends when the shift ends so I can go home and actually live a life. I chose not having to prove anything to anyone. He picked up his cleaning cart. Is it prestigious? No. Does it pay well? No. But I sleep better than I ever did when I was training 16 hours a day and measuring my worth by who I could beat. I don't know if I can do that, Lena said quietly. Give it all up. I'm not asking you to give anything up. I'm just trying to show you that there might be more to having than what you're holding on to right now. After they left, Lena walked to the windows overlooking the city. Her empire. Her achievement, her proof of worth. From up here, Seattle looked beautiful and distant, a collection of lights with no real substance. She thought about Evan going home to his apartment, reading to Caleb, tucking him in. Simple things, ordinary things, things that would never make headlines or win championships or build reputations, things that might actually matter. The next 2 weeks brought a shift that Lena felt but couldn't fully name. Her daytime classes continued as always. She was still Master Hartley, still flawless in her technique, still capable of dismantling any student who challenged her. But something had changed in how she taught. She found herself asking questions instead of just correcting mistakes, watching students struggle and letting them find their own way instead of immediately showing them the perfect form. One of her advanced students, a 26-year-old tech executive named Michael, who'd been training for 4 years, noticed. Master Hartley, you're different lately, he said after class one afternoon. More, I don't know, patient? Is that a problem? No, it's just different. Usually you show us the right way and we drill it until we can execute. Lately you've been asking us questions about how things feel instead of whether they're correct. Lena considered this. Do you prefer the old way? Michael thought about it. Honestly, I don't know. The old way was clearer, simpler. You told us what to do and we did it. This new way is harder because I have to figure things out for myself. But, he paused, I think I'm learning more. Not more techniques. Something else. What? How to pay attention to what my body is actually doing instead of just executing movements I've memorized. He looked uncomfortable, like he was admitting something shameful. I've been training for 4 years and I just realized I don't actually feel most of what I do. I just perform it. Yeah, Lena said softly. I know the feeling. That evening, she shared the conversation with Evan while he mopped and Caleb drew. Your student is becoming conscious, Evan said. That's always uncomfortable. Conscious of what? Of the fact that there's a difference between doing and being. Most people train their whole lives and never realize they're operating their bodies like machines instead of living in them. Lena sat on Caleb's bench watching Evan work. She'd stopped training during these evening hours. Instead, she just talked with him while he cleaned, asking questions, listening to his answers, slowly piecing together an understanding that kept slipping away whenever she tried to grasp it too firmly. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Sure." "Caleb's mother. Where is she?" Evan's mop paused mid-stroke. Caleb's pencil kept moving, but Lena saw the boy's shoulders tense slightly. "She's gone," Evan said after a moment. "Died when Caleb was 3. Car accident. I'm sorry." "Me too." He resumed mopping. "Emily was the one who first taught me about flowing instead of forcing. She was a dancer. Used to get so frustrated with me because I approached everything like a fight to be won. She'd tell me, 'Evan, not everything is a battle. Sometimes you can just move with things instead of against them.'" His voice carried old pain, worn smooth by years but still there. "Took me a long time to understand what she meant." "Is that why you stopped competing?" "Partly. After she died, I had Caleb to take care of. Couldn't train 16 hours a day anymore. Couldn't travel for tournaments. And honestly, I didn't want to. Losing her showed me how fragile everything is. How quickly what you think is solid can just disappear." He glanced at his son. "So I focused on what actually mattered, making sure he grew up with at least one parent who was actually present." Caleb spoke without looking up. "Dad cries sometimes, at night when he thinks I'm asleep." Evan stopped moving. His face showed surprise and something that might have been embarrassment. "It's okay," Caleb continued, still drawing. "Ms. Chen at school says crying means you love something enough to miss it. She says people who don't cry have forgotten how to love." "Ms. Chen sounds like a wise woman," Lena said. Her throat felt tight. "She's nice. She lets me draw during quiet time." Lena watched father and son, these two people who'd been broken by loss and somehow found a way to keep living that was more whole than anything she'd achieved with all her perfection and control. They had so little, a janitor's salary, a small apartment, no prestige or power or protection from the world's hardness. And yet they had something she'd been searching for without knowing she was searching. "I envy you," she said quietly. Evan looked at her with surprise. "Why would you envy me?" "Because you know what matters. I'm 42 years old, and I'm just now realizing I've spent my entire adult life chasing things that don't actually mean anything. That's not true. Your skill means something. Your dojo means something. Everything you've built means something. Does it? Or is it just elaborate armor, like Caleb drew? A way to keep people at a distance while looking impressive?" Evan set his mop aside and came to sit on the bench beside her. Caleb kept drawing between them, a small presence holding space for the adult conversation happening around him. "Here's what I think," Evan said. "Nothing you've done is wasted. Not the training, not the achievements, not even the armor. You needed all of it to get you here, to this moment where you can start asking different questions. The problem isn't what you've built. The problem is thinking what you've built is all there is. So what else is there? That's what you're figuring out. And it's scary because you can't control it or perfect it or put it on a wall like a trophy, but it's real in a way trophies never are." Lena looked at him, this man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself into someone who cleaned floors and raised his son and moved like water through a world that kept trying to make him stone. "How did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being hard." The words settled into Lena like truth she'd always known but never admitted. She was tired too. Tired of being untouchable, tired of being perfect, tired of standing alone at the top of her mountain. "Will you show me something?" she asked. "What?" "How you move with Caleb, not teaching, not training, just how you are together." Evan glanced at his son. "What do you think, buddy? Want to show Miss Hartley how we play?" Caleb's face lit up. He abandoned his drawing and jumped from the bench. "Can we do the water game?" "Sure." Lena watched as father and son moved to the center of the mat. They didn't bow or assume positions. They just started moving, slow and flowing, like a dance with no choreography. Evan would extend his hand and Caleb would flow around it. Caleb would kick softly, and Evan would let the movement push him into a turn. They were playing, Lena realized. They were using martial arts movements, but not as techniques, as a way to be together, to communicate without words, to exist in shared space. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. After a few minutes, they stopped, both smiling, and returned to the bench. "That was the water game?" Lena asked. "We pretend we're water," Caleb explained. "Water always finds a way around things. It doesn't fight. It just keeps flowing until it gets where it's going." "Can I try?" Both Evan and Caleb looked surprised. "With us?" Caleb asked. "If you'll let me." The boy looked at his father, who nodded. They all moved to the mat, and Caleb explained the rules. There weren't any, really, except that you had to move like water and never force anything. Lena tried. She really tried. But every time Evan or Caleb moved toward her, her body wanted to block, to counter, to respond with technique. She felt clumsy and awkward, constantly catching herself about to execute some perfect combination instead of just flowing. "You're thinking too much," Caleb said after a minute. "Just feel where we are and go where we're not." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do. You just forgot. Close your eyes." Lena closed her eyes. Without vision, her other senses sharpened. She felt Evan moving close to her left side, felt Caleb circling to her right, and instead of preparing to defend or attack, she just moved, stepped away from Evan's approach, swayed back from Caleb's hand, let herself drift through the space between them. "There," Evan said softly. "That's it. That's water." For 30 seconds, Lena moved with them in darkness, flowing through space she couldn't see, trusting her body to sense and respond without her mind commanding it. It felt like flying, like dissolving, like finally letting go of something she'd been holding so tight her hands had gone numb. Then her mind kicked back in, trying to control again, and she stumbled. "That was good," Evan said as she opened her eyes. "Really good." "I lost it." "Of course you did. You've spent 23 years training yourself to never lose control. 30 seconds is amazing." Lena felt something break open in her chest, not cracking, but blooming. She looked at Evan and Caleb standing there on her pristine mat in her perfect dojo, these two people who had nothing she'd spent her life accumulating, and she felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd forgotten the name for it: gratitude. "Thank you," she said. Her voice cracked. "Thank you for teaching me." "We're not teaching you," Caleb said seriously. "We're just reminding you what you already knew." And then, for the first time in years, Lena Hartley cried. The tears came hard and fast, surprising her with their intensity. Lena pressed her hands to her face, embarrassed and unable to stop, feeling years of held tension drain out through her eyes. She felt Caleb's small hand slip into hers, warm and certain, and that simple gesture made her cry harder. "It's okay," the boy said softly. "Dad says sometimes you have to cry out the old stuff before the new stuff has room to grow." Evan's hand settled on her shoulder, steady and undemanding. "Take your time." So she did. She sat on the mat in her expensive dojo with a janitor and his 8-year-old son, and she cried for the girl she'd been before perfection became more important than joy, for the relationship she'd sacrificed to ambition, for the 23 years spent building armor instead of building connection, for the untouchable master who'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched. When the tears finally slowed, Lena wiped her face with her hands and laughed shakily. "Sorry, I don't usually fall apart on people." "You didn't fall apart," Evan said. "You let something go. That's different." "Feels the same." "I know, but it's not." Lena looked at Caleb, who was still holding her hand. "Thank you for being patient with me." "You're welcome. Do you feel better?" "Yes, and also worse, and also different." She laughed again. "I don't know what I feel, honestly." "That's okay too." Evan stood and offered Lena his hand. She took it and let him pull her to her feet. "I should let you finish your work," she said. "I've kept you long enough." "The floors will still be dirty tomorrow," but he retrieved his cart anyway. "Same time next week?" "What? No." Lena shook her head. "Tomorrow, if you're willing." Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition that they'd crossed some threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. "Tomorrow," Evan agreed. That night, Lena drove home through Seattle's gleaming streets and felt like she was seeing the city for the first time. The same buildings, the same lights, the same endless ambition rising toward the sky. But she was different, and that made everything look different too. She stood at her penthouse windows for a long time, not drinking whiskey, just standing, feeling the weight of her body on her feet, feeling her breath move in and out, practicing the thing Evan had been trying to teach her, being present without trying to control the present. It lasted maybe 2 minutes before her mind started spinning again, planning and analyzing and trying to make sense of what was happening to her. But 2 minutes was longer than 0 minutes. That had to count for something. The next evening, Lena was on the mat early, stretching in ways that felt different now. Not warming up for combat, just moving because movement felt good. When Evan and Caleb arrived, she was lying on her back doing slow leg raises, paying attention to how her abs engaged and released with each repetition. Starting without us? Evan set his cart by the door. Just playing around. Lena sat up. Can I ask you something? Anything. That celebrity you mentioned the first night, the one who tried to humiliate you, that really happened? Evan's expression closed slightly. Caleb had already headed for his bench, but he paused, looking back at his father. That wasn't tonight's story, Evan said carefully. I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't pry. It's not prying. It's just... He glanced at Caleb. It's complicated. Dad, Caleb said quietly, you always tell me that talking about hard things makes them less hard. Evan smiled despite himself, using my own wisdom against me. That's fair. He walked to the mat and sat cross-legged. Lena joined him, and Caleb came over too, settling between them like he belonged there. His name was Marcus Chen, Evan began. He was the rising star of American martial arts 5 years ago. Young, charismatic, undefeated in competition. Social media famous. The kind of guy who made training look cool instead of difficult. He picked at the mat with his fingers. We trained at the same school for a while, back when I was still competing. He didn't like me much. Why not? Because I beat him. Once. In a sparring match that didn't matter, that nobody except the people in the room ever saw. But it mattered to him. I was older, less flashy, not interested in the celebrity side of things. And I made him look ordinary. Evan's voice carried old weariness. He never forgot it. What happened? Lena asked, though part of her already knew. She'd met enough Marcus Chens in her career, brilliant fighters whose ego mattered more than the art itself. About a year after Emily died, I was working at a gym. Not teaching, just maintaining equipment, keeping things clean. Marcus came in for a seminar. He recognized me, and he couldn't resist making a show of how far I'd fallen. Caleb spoke up. He said Dad was washed up. Said anyone who'd ever been any good wouldn't be cleaning other people's sweat. Caleb, you weren't supposed to... I was there, Dad. I heard everything. Evan closed his eyes briefly. Yeah, you were there. I'm sorry you were there. What did you do? Lena asked. Nothing, at first. I needed the job. Couldn't afford to lose it because some guy with an ego wanted to relive old grudges. But Marcus wouldn't let it go. He kept pushing. Finally challenged me in front of everyone at the seminar. Said if I had any pride left, I'd step on the mat. And you did. I did. Not because of pride. Because I saw his students watching him humiliate me, and I saw them learning that it was okay to treat people that way. To kick someone when they're down. To value reputation over character. Evan looked at his hands. Emily used to say that how you treat people who can't do anything for you shows who you really are. Marcus was showing everyone exactly who he was, and I realized I had a choice. Let his students learn that bullying works, or show them something different. What happened when you stepped on the mat? Lena knew she was pushing, but she needed to hear this, needed to understand what was coming. I didn't fight him. That's what he wanted. Some dramatic battle he could win and use to prove he was better. Instead, I just moved, let him attack and float around everything he threw at me. Made him look like he was fighting shadows. After about 3 minutes, he was exhausted and frustrated, and I'd barely broken a sweat. Did you hit him? Once. He came in too aggressive, overextended, and I tapped him on the forehead with 2 fingers. Didn't hurt him, just showed him I could have, if I'd wanted to. Then I stepped off the mat and went back to wiping down equipment. Lena could picture it perfectly. Evan's calm against Marcus's fury, technique meeting empty air, ego destroying itself against water. How did he react? He left. Didn't finish the seminar. His students stayed, though. Some of them asked me questions after, about how I moved, about why I didn't fight back, about whether winning meant what they'd been taught it meant. Evan's voice softened. A few of them ended up training differently because of that day. I got emails from some of them later, saying thank you. That mattered more than anything else. But you lost your job. Yeah, the gym owner didn't like the drama. Didn't matter that I hadn't started it. I was the maintenance guy and Marcus was the celebrity. Easy choice for him. Evan shrugged. Found another job within a week, then another after that, then eventually ended up here. Lena felt anger rise in her chest. Not at Evan, but for him. At a world that valued flash over substance, reputation over character, celebrity over quiet dignity. Marcus Chen is still competing, still famous. I've seen his videos. He's got millions of followers. I know. That's not fair. No, it's not. But fair is a story we tell ourselves. Life just is what it is. Dad says fairness is when you make things right, not when things are right, Caleb added. He says you can't control what happens, but you can control what you do about it. That's a heavy burden for an 8-year-old to carry, Lena said. I'm almost 9, Caleb corrected. And it's not heavy if it's true. Evan reached over and ruffled his son's hair. When did you get so smart? You taught me, and Mom taught you. So it's like she's still teaching through you teaching me. Something profound moved across Evan's face. Grief and love and pride all tangled together. Yeah, buddy, that's exactly right. They sat in silence for a moment. 3 people bound together by stories and losses and the slow, difficult work of learning to be present instead of perfect. Marcus is coming here, Lena said suddenly. The word surprised even her. Evan's head snapped up. What? Next month. His agent contacted me 3 weeks ago about hosting a celebrity seminar here. I said yes before I... She gestured vaguely at Evan. Before all this. Before I understood anything. Cancel it. I can't. The contracts are signed. Deposits are paid. My students are excited. Half of them only joined because they heard someone famous might come teach. Then I'll make sure to work different hours that week. No. Lena's voice came out stronger than she'd intended. No. You shouldn't have to hide. This is your workplace too. Lena, it's fine. I don't need to... It's not fine. Nothing about this is fine. He humiliated you for no reason except his own insecurity. And now he gets to come to my dojo like some conquering hero while you mop the floors he walks on? She felt heat in her face, anger clarifying into purpose. No, that's not happening. What are you going to do? Disinvite him? That'll cause more problems than it solves. I don't know yet, but there has to be something. Some way to... Lena stopped. An idea was forming, dangerous and necessary. What if you taught the seminar? Evan stared at her. That's insane. Is it? You're better than him. You know things he'll never understand. My students would learn more from one session with you than a whole day with Marcus Chen. Your students paid to learn from a famous champion, not a janitor. Then maybe it's time they learned there's a difference between famous and skilled. Lena. Evan's voice was patient but firm. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't teach. I stopped teaching for a reason. What reason? Because teaching means standing in front of people and acting like you have answers. And I don't have answers. I just have questions that led me somewhere different than where I started. That's exactly what makes you qualified to teach. Marcus Chen has all the answers. That's his problem. You understand that mastery is a question, not a destination. This is a bad idea. Probably, but it feels like the right bad idea. Caleb had been watching this exchange like a tennis match. Now he spoke up. Ms. Hartley, why do you care so much about what happened to my dad? The question stopped Lena cold. Why did she care? She barely knew these people. They'd been in her life for less than a month. And yet the thought of Evan hiding in storage closets while Marcus Chen strutted around her dojo made her physically angry. Because it's not right, she said finally. Because I've spent my whole life believing that skill and dedication would be enough. That if you were the best, people would see it and respect it. And your father is the best martial artist I've ever seen, and he's invisible. That breaks something I thought was true about the world. So you want to fix it, Caleb said. You want to make the world work the way it should work instead of the way it does work. Yes? Is that wrong? No, it's just hard. Dad says the world is really big and people are really small. Sometimes all you can do is make your own small space work right and hope it spreads. What if I want to make a bigger space work right? Then you need help. One person can't change things, but lots of people can. Lena looked at this child who spoke with the clarity of someone 3 times his age, and she understood why Evan had given up everything else to make sure this boy grew up with a present father. Caleb wasn't just smart, he was wise in ways that couldn't be taught, only modeled. You're right, Lena said. I can't do this alone. I'll need help from people who matter, people with influence. What are you thinking? Evan asked warily. I'm thinking that Marcus Chen agreed to teach at my dojo because it's prestigious. Because being associated with the Hartley Institute means something in martial arts circles. Lena felt the idea crystallizing as she spoke. What if I invited other masters to attend? Made it a gathering of peers instead of just a celebrity showcase? He'd never agree to that. He doesn't have to agree. The contract says he'll teach a seminar. It doesn't specify the audience composition. She pulled out her phone. I know at least 6 eighth dans within driving distance. People I've trained with, competed against, people who value substance over social media. If they all show up, he'll be exposed, Evan said quietly. You'll put him in a room with people who can see through his flash to what's actually there. Yes. That's cruel. Is it crueler than what he did to you? Evan was silent for a long moment. 2 wrongs don't make a right. No. But sometimes accountability looks like being seen clearly by people who actually understand what they're looking at. What about me? Where do I fit in this plan? Lena met his eyes. You'll be there, working, as usual. And if Marcus says anything, if he tries anything, I'll handle it. This is my dojo, my space, and I decide what behavior is acceptable here. You're going to ruin your reputation over a janitor. No, I'm going to demonstrate that character matters more than celebrity. That's not ruining my reputation, that's defining it. Evan looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You've changed. You changed me. I didn't do anything except show up and mop your floors. You showed me what strength without armor looks like, what mastery without dominance looks like, what it means to be present instead of perfect. Lena felt the truth of her words as she spoke them. Marcus Chen thinks he humiliated you, but really you revealed him. You showed anyone who is paying attention what happens when ego meets actual mastery, and I think it's time more people saw that. Caleb tugged on his father's sleeve. Dad, I think you should let her do it. Buddy, this isn't your decision. I know, but you always tell me that hiding from hard things makes them bigger, and you've been hiding from Marcus for 5 years. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. I'm not hiding, I'm choosing not to engage. Isn't that the same thing? Caleb's voice was gentle but persistent. You changed everything about your life because of what he did. You won't go to tournaments anymore. You won't teach. You won't even tell people you used to train. That's hiding, Dad. Evan's face showed pain and recognition. When did you get old enough to call me on my stuff? I've always been this old. You just weren't ready to see it. Despite everything, Evan laughed. Okay, you're right. I have been hiding. But not from Marcus. From who I used to be. From the part of me that cared what people thought. From the ego that wanted to prove something. Then prove something different now, Lena said. Not that you're better than him. That there's a better way to be. The weight of the decision hung in the air between them. Lena could see Evan struggling with it, balancing fear against possibility, safety against growth. She understood that struggle intimately, now. It was the same one she'd been wrestling with for the past month, whether to stay protected in her armor or risk being hurt by taking it off. If I agree to this, Evan said slowly, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to fight him. Not physically, not with words, not even with demonstration. If he comes after me again, I'm going to do exactly what I did last time, make space and let his aggression exhaust itself. What if that's not enough? It will be enough. Because the masters you're inviting will be watching, and they'll see what I see, that Marcus Chen is a brilliant technician with an empty center. His movements are perfect, but they come from fear and ego, not from understanding. In a room full of eighth dans, that will be obvious. And if it's not? Then I was wrong about what mastery looks like, and I need to go back to learning. Lena felt something settle in her chest. This was right, risky, and potentially explosive, and absolutely right. Okay, I'll start making calls tomorrow. One more condition, Evan said. When this happens, whatever happens, you can't protect me. You can't step in or defend me or try to control how people respond. I need to be responsible for my own presence there. But no buts. If I'm going to do this, I have to do it as myself, not as someone you're defending, not as a project or a cause, just as Evan Brooks, who cleans your floors and happens to know some things about moving through the world. That's a lot to ask. I know, but it's the only way this works. Otherwise, I'm just another person you're trying to perfect and control. The words stung because they were true. Lena felt her old patterns trying to reassert themselves, her need to manage situations, to ensure outcomes, to maintain control over everything in her domain. But Evan was asking her to let go, to trust, to allow things to unfold without her directing every moment. I'll try, she said. I can't promise I'll succeed, but I'll try. That's all any of us can do. Caleb had been listening to all of this with unusual quietness. Now he pulled out his sketchbook and started drawing again, his pencil moving quickly across the page. Neither adult interrupted him. After a few minutes, he held up the sketch. It showed 3 figures on a mat, himself, small and centered. Evan and Lena flanking him, both in motion, but their movements were different than Caleb had drawn before. Evan's lines were still flowing and smooth, but now they had direction, purpose, moving towards something instead of just away. Lena's lines were still strong and angular, but softer at the edges, less like weapons and more like tools. That's us now, Caleb said. Different than before. How are we different? Lena asked. Before you moved like you were fighting ghosts. Dad moved like he was trying to disappear. Now you're both moving like you're actually here, like you're real. We were always real, buddy, Evan said gently. You know what I mean? Real like I can see you, not real like you're hiding behind moving. Lena looked at the drawing and felt the accuracy of Caleb's perception. She had been fighting ghosts, the ghost of inadequacy, the ghost of ordinariness, the ghost of vulnerability. All her perfect techniques and flawless forms had been armor against specters that couldn't hurt her anyway. And Evan had been disappearing, making himself invisible even while standing in plain sight. But something was changing for both of them. Can I keep this one too? Lena asked. Caleb nodded and tore the page carefully from his book. You should put it next to the other one, so you can see how much you've changed. I will. That night, after Evan had finished his cleaning and they'd said their goodbyes, Lena stayed in the dojo for hours. She didn't train, didn't run through forms or work on techniques. She just sat on the mat holding Caleb's drawings, thinking about armor and visibility, and the terrifying work of becoming real. Her phone buzzed with texts and emails, students with questions, business associates with proposals, magazines requesting interviews. Her public life demanding her attention as always. But for the first time, those demands felt less like obligations and more like choices. She could respond or not respond. Could say yes or no. Could set boundaries that had never existed before. She called her first 8th Dan just before midnight, Martin Reeves, who'd trained with her in Japan 15 years ago. They'd kept in touch sporadically over the years, mutual respect between masters who understood the cost of excellence. Lena? Is everything okay? Martin's voice was thick with sleep. Sorry for the late call. I need a favor. At midnight? Must be some favor. I'm hosting a seminar next month. Marcus Chen is teaching. I want you to attend. Silence on the other end. Then carefully. Why? Because I think it's time the martial arts community saw him clearly, and I think we need a room full of people who know the difference between celebrity and mastery. That's a loaded invitation. I know. I'm asking anyway. More silence. Lena could hear Martin breathing, considering. What changed, Lena? You've never cared about this kind of politics before. I met someone who showed me that how we treat people matters more than how skilled we are, and I saw how the community treated that person versus how they treat Marcus Chen. The contrast made me angry. Who is this person? Someone you'd respect. Someone who understands things about martial arts that most of us have forgotten in our chase for perfection. Mysterious. Are you going to tell me who? You'll meet him at the seminar, if you come. Martin laughed. You know I can't resist that kind of hook. Fine, I'll be there. But, Lena, whatever you're planning, be careful. Marcus has powerful friends. He's made a lot of money for a lot of people. If you challenge him publicly, there will be consequences. I know. I'm willing to accept them. Then I'm in. This should be interesting if nothing else. Lena made 5 more calls that night. 2 more 8th Dans said yes immediately. 1 said maybe. 2 said no. 2 invested in maintaining good relationships with the celebrity circuit. By 2 a.m., she had commitments from 3 legitimate masters and tentative interest from 2 more. It would have to be enough. She drove home as dawn started breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Seattle looked softer at this hour, less aggressive in its ambition. Or maybe she was just seeing it differently now, through eyes that had started learning to look for beauty instead of just dominance. In her apartment, she taped both of Caleb's drawings to the wall beside her bed, where she'd see them first thing each morning. The before and after, the armor and the emergence, the fighting with herself and the starting to be real. Then she lay down and slept deeply for the first time in months, dreaming of water flowing around stones, of children moving like joy itself, of janitors who were secretly masters, of masters who were secretly just frightened people in elaborate disguise. She woke 6 hours later to her phone ringing, her administrative assistant, voice tight with concern. Lena, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Marcus Chen's people just called. They're adding requirements to the seminar. He wants final approval of all attendees. He wants his own security team present. And he wants a promotional video made that he can use for his social media. Lena felt her old instincts rise, the urge to control, to manage, to smooth over conflicts before they could grow. Then she remembered Evan's words. Not everything needs to be fought. Sometimes you just make space and let people reveal themselves. Tell them no, Lena said calmly. No to which part? All of it. The contract says he teaches a 2-hour seminar. Everything else is negotiable, and I'm declining to negotiate. Lena, they'll pull out. His agent made that very clear. Then they pull out. That's their choice. But the students, the deposits, the reputation will all survive. Tell Marcus Chen's people that the Hartley Institute maintains its standards regardless of who's teaching. He's welcome to honor his commitment or break it. Either way, we'll move forward. Her assistant was quiet for a moment. You sound different. I feel different. Should I be worried? Lena looked at Caleb's drawings on her wall, at the figure slowly becoming visible under all that armor. No, I think you should be hopeful. We're about to remember what this place was supposed to be about. And what's that? The art. Not the artist, the practice. Not the personality. The real work of becoming who we're meant to be instead of who we think will impress people. That's beautiful, Lena. Also probably bad for business. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only thing that's actually good for business. We'll find out. After they hung up, Lena made herself breakfast for the first time in years. Not prepared meals from a service, but actual cooking. Eggs scrambled with vegetables, toast with butter, coffee made in her neglected machine. The food tasted different when she made it herself. Better. More real. She was starting to understand what Evan had been trying to teach her, that presence was a practice, that being real meant accepting imperfection, that the armor she'd built to protect herself had become a prison, and the only way out was to take it off piece by piece until she could feel the air on her skin again. It was terrifying. It was necessary. And somewhere in Seattle, in an apartment she'd never seen, a janitor and his son were probably eating breakfast too, ordinary and together, masters of something Lena was just beginning to learn. The call from Marcus Chen's agent came 3 days later, and the man's voice dripped with barely contained fury. Miss Hartley, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. Marcus has 2 million Instagram followers. He brings legitimacy to establishments like yours. And you're treating him like some nobody who should be grateful for the opportunity. Lena stood at her office window, looking down at the dojo floor where her afternoon class was running through combinations. She could see the students moving in perfect unison, their techniques flawless and empty, just like hers had been for so many years. Mr. Patterson, I understand exactly who I'm dealing with. A talented martial artist who's forgotten that the art is bigger than his brand. And I'm treating him exactly how I treat everyone who walks through my doors, with respect for what they bring, and with clear expectations about what this space stands for. He's not coming if those other masters are there. He's not performing for their judgment. Then he's not coming. The contract has a cancellation clause. I suggest you review it with your legal team. You'll regret this. Marcus has influence in this community. He can make things very difficult for you. I'm sure he can. That's his choice. Just like honoring his commitment or breaking it is his choice. Lena kept her voice even, channeling Evan's calm in the face of aggression. Is there anything else? The line went dead. Lena set her phone down and realized her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She'd just potentially blown up a major event that would have brought significant prestige and revenue to her dojo. Students had paid deposits, plans had been made, and she'd walked away from it all because a janitor had shown her what real strength looked like. Her phone buzzed immediately. Her assistant. He canceled. Marcus Chen's team just sent formal notice. They're citing creative differences and demanding return of his appearance fee. Return it, all of it, plus send a formal apology for any inconvenience. Lena, are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That evening, when Evan and Caleb arrived, Lena was sitting in the center of the mat, not training, just sitting. Evan took one look at her face and knew. He pulled out. This morning, very dramatically. His agent made sure I understood what a mistake I'd made. Evan set his card aside and came to sit across from her. Caleb joined them, forming their usual triangle. How do you feel? Terrified, relieved, like I just jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling. Both, probably. That's how big changes feel. My assistant thinks I've lost my mind. Half my advanced students are asking for refunds. I have 3 other masters planning to show up to a seminar that no longer exists. Lena laughed, but it came out shaky. I think I just destroyed everything I spent 20 years building. Or, Evan said quietly, you just cleared space for something new to grow. That's very zen, also possibly delusional. Definitely both, he smiled. But here's what I know. You made a choice based on what matters to you instead of what's easy or profitable. That's not destruction. That's integrity. Integrity doesn't pay the bills. No, but it lets you sleep at night. Caleb had pulled out his sketchbook and was drawing while they talked. Ms. Hartley, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you like teaching? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? Like, when you're showing people how to move, does it make you happy? Or is it just something you're good at? Lena opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. When was the last time she'd thought about whether teaching made her happy? She was excellent at it. Her students won competitions. Her dojo had a reputation for producing champions. But happy? I don't know, she admitted. I'm not sure I've thought about it that way. You should, Caleb said, his pencil still moving. Dad says if you do things just because you're good at them but they don't make you happy, you turn into a machine, and machines don't have fun. When did your dad become so wise? He was always wise. He just had to get sad first so he could figure out what mattered. Evan cleared his throat. Buddy, not everyone needs my whole life story. But it's true. You told me that after Mom died, you had to decide if you wanted to keep being the person you thought you should be or become the person you actually were. And you picked actually were. I did say that. I was hoping you'd forgotten so I could sound mysterious and complicated. You're not mysterious, you're just sad sometimes and happy sometimes, and you try to be nice even when you're sad. The simple clarity of it made Lena's chest ache. This 8-year-old understood his father better than most adults understood themselves. And Evan had created space for that understanding by being honest about his pain instead of hiding behind armor. Caleb, Lena said slowly, what if teaching doesn't make me happy, but I don't know what else to do? Then you figure out what does make you happy and do that instead. It's not that simple when you have a business and students depending on you. Dad depended on training. He was really good at it, and people gave him money for it. But it didn't make him happy anymore after Mom died, so he stopped. Now he cleans floors and takes care of me. That makes him happy. I don't think your dad is as happy as you think he is, Lena said gently. He's not all the way happy, but he's real happy. There's a difference. Evan was very quiet. When Lena looked at him, she saw tears on his face, running silently down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away or apologize for them. Just let them be. Your kid is incredible, Lena said. I know. Evan's voice was thick. He sees things I forget to notice, like the fact that I'm actually okay now, even though okay doesn't look like what I thought it would look like. They sat in silence for a while, 3 people learning to be present with discomfort and uncertainty and the messy truth of being human. Outside the dojo windows, Seattle's evening light painted everything gold. Cars moved through streets. People walked to restaurants and homes. Life continued, indifferent to personal revelations and collapsed plans. Finally, Evan spoke. What are you going to do about the masters who are coming? I don't know. I should probably cancel. Tell them the whole thing fell through. Or you could do something else. Like what? Like use the space differently. You cleared your schedule for a seminar. You have 3 8th Dans willing to show up. That's not nothing. What would we even do? Whatever you want. It's your dojo. Evan looked around at the pristine space, the expensive equipment, the wall of mirrors reflecting empty potential. What would you do if there were no expectations, no students to impress, no reputation to maintain, no business metrics to hit, just you and some people who love martial arts? What would you want to explore? The question opened something in Lena's mind. What would she want to explore? Not what techniques would look impressive or what combinations would win tournaments, but what actually interested her now after everything Evan had shown her. I'd want to talk about presence, she said slowly, about how we've turned martial arts into performance instead of practice, about the difference between technique and understanding, about... She stopped, afraid of how it would sound. About what? About how lonely it is at the top when you've sacrificed everything else to get there. About whether mastery is worth the cost. About finding a way back to joy after you've forgotten what joy feels like. Evan smiled. That sounds like a seminar I'd actually want to attend. It's not what people expect from a gathering of masters. There's no flash, no demonstrations, no social media content. Exactly. Which means the only people who'd show up are people who actually care about the questions. That's maybe 5 people in the entire martial arts community. Then invite those 5 people and see what happens. Lena pulled out her phone and looked at her contacts. Hundreds of names accumulated over 23 years in martial arts. Champions and masters and business people who'd built empires on the foundation of combat. How many of them would be interested in a conversation about loneliness and joy and the cost of perfection? She started with Martin Reeves. He answered on the second ring. Lena, I heard about Marcus. Are you okay? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. But I need to know something. Why did you agree to come when I first called? Was it to watch Marcus get exposed, or was there another reason? Martin was quiet for a moment. Honest answer? Please. I was hoping to see what had changed in you. Your voice on the phone that night, you sounded different, more alive, less like you were reading from a script of who Lana Hartley is supposed to be. He paused. I've watched you for 15 years become more and more perfect and more isolated. Whatever shifted in you, I wanted to see it. The Marcus thing was just an excuse. What if I told you I'm doing a different kind of seminar? No demonstrations, no techniques, just a conversation about what we've lost in our pursuit of mastery. I'd say that sounds terrifying and necessary, and I'm definitely coming. Even though there's no famous celebrity to watch? Especially because there's no famous celebrity to watch. Those spectacles are exhausting. I'd rather have something real. Lena's throat tightened. Thank you. For what? For being willing to show up for questions instead of answers. She made similar calls to the other masters. One was confused and politely declined. The other 2 were immediately interested. By the end of the evening, she had 3 confirmed eighth dans and a plan that felt both terrifying and more honest than anything she'd done in years. Evan had finished his cleaning and was preparing to leave when Lena stopped him. "I want you there," she said. "At the seminar, not as staff, as a participant." "Lena, that's not— I know what you're going to say, that you're not qualified, that you don't have rank or credentials, that you're just a janitor. But rank and credentials are just armor, and I'm trying to create a space without armor. So I'm asking you, Evan Brooks, person who knows things about presence and flow, and the difference between technique and understanding, will you participate?" Evan looked at Caleb, who nodded encouragingly. "Dad, you should do it. These people need to hear what you know." "What I know isn't special. It's real," Lena interrupted. "That's what makes it special. Everything else is performance. What you have is real. I don't have anything prepared. Neither do any of us. That's the point. We're going to show up and be honest about what we don't know instead of pretending we have everything figured out." Evan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Lena had learned meant he was genuinely conflicted. "This feels like a setup, like you're trying to give me some moment of validation or vindication. I'm not. I'm trying to learn from you in front of witnesses. I'm trying to demonstrate that the things you've taught me matter more than any technique I've perfected. And yes, there's a part of me that wants these masters to see you the way I see you. Is that so wrong?" "It's not wrong. It's just—" Evan struggled for words. "I'm afraid of becoming someone I'm not again, of letting other people's perception of me matter more than my own understanding of who I am." "Then don't let it matter. Show up as exactly who you are and let that be enough." "What if I'm not enough?" The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke her. This man who moved like water and spoke like he'd solved ancient riddles was afraid of being seen as inadequate. Of course he was. That's why he'd become invisible. That's why he cleaned floors instead of teaching. Not because he didn't have anything to offer, but because offering it meant risking the judgment that had already hurt him once. "You're enough," Lena said firmly. "You've been enough since the first night I tried to hit you and failed. You were enough when you showed me how to move without forcing. You were enough when you let me cry on your shoulder and didn't make it weird. You're enough right now, standing here in your maintenance uniform, afraid and willing to be afraid out loud. That's more than enough." Caleb tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, remember what you told me when I was scared to go to new school? You said courage is just fear that decided to show up anyway. This is your show up anyway chance." Evan looked down at his son, then at Lena, then at the empty dojo that had become something different than what it was built to be. "Okay, I'll be there, but I'm not wearing a GI or pretending to be something official. I show up as maintenance guy who has some thoughts, or I don't show up at all." Deal. The 2 weeks before the seminar passed in a strange blur of anticipation and preparation that involved no actual preparation. Lena didn't create an agenda or plan discussion topics. She just cleared the space and sent a simple message to the 3 masters who'd confirmed. Come ready to question everything. No demonstrations, no answers, just honest exploration of what mastery actually means. Her regular classes continued, but something had shifted in how she taught. She asked more questions, allowed more silence. Let students struggle with concepts instead of immediately showing them the correct execution. Some students loved it. Others were frustrated and confused. A few dropped out. Lena watched them go without trying to convince them to stay. That was new, too. Accepting that her teaching wouldn't work for everyone, and that was okay. One evening, about a week before the seminar, Michael, the tech executive who'd noticed her changing teaching style, stayed after class. "Master Hartley, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "What happened to you? And I don't mean that critically. You're clearly going through something transformative. I'm just curious what sparked it." Lena looked at him. This student who'd been training with her for 4 years, who'd always been technically excellent, but somehow hollow in his execution. "I met someone who showed me the difference between being good at something and understanding it." "A teacher?" "Not officially, but yes." "Can I meet them?" The question surprised her. "Why?" "Because I've been training for 4 years and I'm realizing I don't actually know why. At first it was fitness, then it was achievement, then it was just habit. But watching you change has made me wonder if there's something deeper I've been missing." "There is." but I'm not sure I can teach it to you. I'm still learning it myself. That's why I want to meet whoever's teaching you. Maybe they can help me start learning it too. Lena thought about Evan mopping floors while Caleb drew and wisdom dropped casually from both of them. About how the most profound teaching she'd ever received had come from someone who claimed not to be a teacher at all. He'll be at the seminar next week. It's not open to students, but she made a decision. I'm going to open it up, not to everyone, but to people who are genuinely searching instead of just collecting techniques. Do you want to come? Absolutely. It won't be what you expect. There will be masters there, but we won't be demonstrating or teaching in the traditional sense, just talking, exploring, being honest about what we don't know. That sounds more valuable than any technique you could show me. Lena ended up extending invitations to 5 of her long-term students, people who'd shown glimmers of actually wanting to understand rather than just perform. To her surprise, all 5 accepted immediately. They were hungry for something real, she realized. They'd been hungry the whole time, and she'd been feeding them perfect technique when what they needed was honest struggle. The night before the seminar, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at Caleb's drawings on her wall, watching the progression from armored to emerging, and wondered what would happen tomorrow. 3/8 Dan masters, 5 searching students, 1 janitor who knew more than all of them, and her, trying to facilitate a conversation about things she barely understood herself. It could be a disaster, could expose her as a fraud, as someone who'd lost her way, as a master who no longer believed in mastery as traditionally defined. Or it could be the most honest thing she'd ever done. At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and drove to the dojo. The building was dark and empty, her footsteps echoing as she walked across the floor Evan had cleaned a few hours earlier. She stood in the center of the mat and tried to feel what he felt when he moved, that quality of presence without forcing, of being without trying to control. It lasted maybe 30 seconds before her mind started spinning again, but 30 seconds was longer than 0. That had to count for something. The morning of the seminar arrived gray and rainy, typical Seattle weather that matched Lena's nervous energy. She arrived at the dojo at 7 a.m. to find Evan already there, sitting on the bench where Caleb usually drew. "You're early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong." "Me too." She sat beside him. "We could still cancel. Tell everyone it was a mistake." "We could, but that would be choosing fear over growth. And I'm tired of making that choice." Even when fear is completely rational? Especially then. Rational fear is just ego trying to protect itself from being seen clearly. They sat in comfortable silence, watching rain streak the windows and morning light slowly fill the space. Lena realized this was the first time she'd been alone with Evan without Caleb present. The boy's absence felt notable, like they were stepping into a different kind of relationship. Not father and teacher. Not employer and employee, just 2 people who'd accidentally stumbled into each other's transformation. "Thank you," Lena said quietly. "For what?" "For showing up that first night, for not quitting when I challenged you out of wounded pride, for being patient while I slowly figured out that everything I thought I knew was incomplete. You're giving me too much credit. I didn't do anything except exist near you." That's exactly what made the difference. You existed as yourself instead of as who you thought you should be. That gave me permission to start doing the same. Evan looked at her with something soft in his expression. "You know what I realized? I was hiding not just from Marcus or from my past. I was hiding from myself. From the part of me that still wanted to matter, to contribute, to be seen. I convinced myself I was being humble. Really, I was just being afraid. And now? Now I'm still afraid. But I'm here anyway." The masters started arriving at 9 a.m. Martin first, then Susan Park from Portland, then James Chen from Vancouver. No relation to Marcus, he clarified immediately, and seemed almost relieved when Lena explained that Marcus had canceled. The 5 students came next, looking nervous and excited. They'd never been in a room with multiple 8th Dans before, and the reverence was obvious. At 9:27, Evan arrived with Caleb. He'd changed from his maintenance uniform into jeans and a simple black t-shirt. Caleb carried his sketchbook like always, but his eyes were wide, taking in the assembled masters with obvious awe. Lena made introductions, explaining who Evan was in the simplest terms possible. "This is Evan Brooks. He's taught me more about martial arts in the past 2 months than I learned in the previous 20 years. Martin raised an eyebrow. High praise. What's your background, Evan? Complicated. I trained in various styles for about 15 years, competed for a while. Stopped about 5 years ago. Why'd you stop? Life changed. Priorities changed. I had a son to raise, and competing didn't fit that life anymore. Susan studied Evan with the intensity of someone used to reading opponents. You move differently than most people. I noticed it the moment you walked in. What style do you primarily practice? I don't anymore. I just move. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Styles are containers. Eventually I realized I was more interested in water than in the shape of the container. James laughed. That's either very profound or very pretentious. I haven't decided which. Probably both, Evan admitted with a slight smile. The seminar began not with technique or demonstration, but with Lena asking a simple question. When was the last time any of us felt joy in our practice? The silence that followed was profound. 4 masters and 5 students looking at each other, suddenly confronted with the possibility that joy and mastery had become separated somewhere along the way. Martin spoke first. I'm not sure I've felt joy in years. Satisfaction when students progress, pride when my school wins tournaments. But joy? Actual joy? I don't remember. Why not? Lena asked. Because somewhere along the way, it became work instead of play. The thing I loved turned into the thing I did to maintain my reputation, my income, my identity as a master. And work doesn't feel like joy. Work feels like obligation. Susan nodded slowly. I tell my students all the time that martial arts should be joyful practice, but I don't practice joyfully myself. I drill techniques. I analyze footage. I look for weaknesses to eliminate. When did elimination become more important than celebration? One of the students, a young woman named Anna, who'd been training for 3 years, raised her hand hesitantly. You don't need to raise your hand, Lena said gently. Just speak. I feel joy sometimes, Anna said, but then I feel guilty about it. Like if I'm enjoying myself, I'm not taking it seriously enough. Like joy and discipline can't coexist. Who taught you that? Evan asked. Anna looked at Lena. I think all of us did. Maybe not with words, but with how we practice. Everything is about correction, improvement, eliminating mistakes. There's no space for just enjoying the movement. Caleb, who'd been drawing quietly in the corner, spoke up. That's sad. Every head turned toward him. The boy looked up from his sketchbook, unintimidated by the room full of martial arts masters. What's sad about it? James asked. That you all know how to do something really cool and hard and beautiful, but you forgot it's supposed to be fun. That's like having ice cream and only eating it to practice eating instead of because it tastes good. The simplicity of the metaphor hit hard. Several people laughed, but the laughter had an edge of recognition to it. Out of the mouths of babes, Martin said. The kid's right. We've turned practice into homework. So how do we get back to joy? Susan asked. We can't just decide to feel differently. Maybe we can't force it, Evan said, but we can create space for it. Stop measuring everything. Stop analyzing everything. Stop trying to perfect everything. Just move and see what happens. That's chaos, James said. Without structure and discipline, there's no progress. I'm not saying abandon structure. I'm saying stop letting structure become a cage. Show us what you mean. The room went quiet. Evan looked at Lena, and she saw the fear in his eyes. But she also saw him make a choice, courage over comfort, visibility over safety. Okay, he said quietly. He stood and moved to the center of the mat. But I'm not demonstrating technique. I'm just going to move. And I want all of you to move with me. No choreography, no planning, just responding to each other. The masters exchanged glances. This wasn't how these things typically went. But slowly, they stood. The students followed. Soon everyone was on the mat, surrounding Evan. Close your eyes, Evan said. Feel where everyone is. Not with your eyes, with your awareness. And then just start moving. Slowly. Find the spaces between people. Flow through them. Never force. Never collide. Just move like water finding its path. What happened next was remarkable in its simplicity and its strangeness. 11 people moving with closed eyes across a mat, sensing each other's presence, flowing around obstacles that were also participants. It was awkward at first. People bumped into each other, apologized, started again. But gradually, something shifted. The movement became smoother, more intuitive. People started sensing each other before contact, adjusting their paths without conscious decision. The room filled with the soft sound of feet on mats and controlled breathing, and underneath it all, something that might have been joy. After about 10 minutes, Evan said softly, "Open your eyes." Everyone stopped moving and looked around. Several people were smiling. Anna's eyes were bright with tears. Martin was shaking his head in wonder. "That was the most present I've felt in years," Susan said. "No technique to execute, no performance to maintain, just movement and awareness and trust." "That's what practice can be," Evan said. "Not always. Sometimes you need to drill techniques and analyze and work on specific skills, but sometimes practice can just be play. Exploration. Joy without purpose except the joy itself." "Why don't we teach this way?" one of the students asked. "Because it doesn't look impressive," Lena answered. "Because you can't put it on social media or use it to attract students. Because it's vulnerable and messy and doesn't fit the image of what mastery is supposed to look like." "But it's real," Martin said. "The 10 minutes of just moving together was more real than most seminars I've attended in the past decade." The conversation continued for hours, moving organically through topics that had never been discussed in Lena's dojo before. The loneliness of being at the top, the pressure to maintain impossible standards, the fear of being seen as weak or inadequate, the sacrifice of relationships and health and basic human connection in pursuit of perfection. And Evan, who'd walked in as the janitor none of them knew, became the center of gravity. Not because he claimed expertise or demonstrated superiority, but because he was willing to be honest about his own struggles and failures. He talked about losing Emily, about the years of competition that left him empty, about the slow rebuilding of a life that valued presence over performance. The masters listened with an attention Lena had rarely seen. These were people used to being the authority in rooms, and here they were, learning from someone with no credentials, no rank, no reputation, learning not techniques, but truth. Not how to be better, but how to be more whole. As the afternoon light began to fade, Caleb held up his sketchbook. "Can I show you what I drew?" The page was covered in flowing lines, all the participants moving together across the mat. But instead of separate figures, the lines blended and interweaved, showing not 11 people, but one continuous movement flowing through 11 forms. "That's beautiful," Susan breathed. "That's exactly what it felt like." "You were all water," Caleb said. "All part of the same water, just moving through different shapes." Martin looked at Evan. "Your son has a gift. He sees things clearly. I'm still working on learning how." As people prepared to leave, exchanging contact information and promising to stay in touch, Martin pulled Lena aside. "I don't know what happened to you, but whatever it is, keep doing it. This was the most valuable martial arts event I've attended in 20 years. No flash, no ego, just honest people trying to remember why they fell in love with this practice in the first place." "I didn't do much. Evan did most of the teaching. You created the space for it to happen. That's teaching too. Maybe the most important kind." After everyone had gone, Lena sat on the mat with Evan and Caleb, exhausted and energized in equal measure. "That was terrifying," she said. "But good terrifying," Evan replied. "The kind that means you're growing." "Do you think it mattered? Do you think anyone will actually change their practice because of today?" "Some will, some won't. That's not your responsibility. You created space for honesty and exploration. What people do with that is up to them." Caleb tugged on Lena's sleeve. "Ms. Hartley, are you still sad?" "What do you mean?" "When we first met, you seemed really sad, even when you were being strong and impressive. You seemed sad underneath. Are you still?" Lena thought about it. "I'm less sad. Or maybe I'm just more okay with being sad sometimes. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, Dad's like that too. Sad sometimes, but okay about it." "We're both works in progress, buddy," Evan said, ruffling his son's hair. "Probably always will be." As they prepared to leave, Evan doing his usual evening maintenance, Lena realized something had fundamentally shifted. This space that had been her fortress, her proof of worth, her elaborate armor against the world, it had become something else. Something more vulnerable and more valuable. A place where honesty was allowed, where masks could come off, where masters could admit they were also students, still learning, still struggling, still human underneath all their achievements. She thought about Marcus Chen, wherever he was, probably posting another video of perfect technique to millions of followers who would never know the difference between performance and presence. Part of her still felt angry about what he'd done to Evan, but mostly she felt sorry for him. Sorry that he'd never know what it felt like to be truly seen, to be vulnerable in front of people and find acceptance instead of judgment. "Thank you," she said to Evan as he finished mopping. "You keep thanking me. I keep telling you I'm not doing anything special. You're being yourself. In a world that demands performance at all times, being yourself is the most special thing you can do." "Then you're welcome, and thank you too." "For what?" "For giving me a reason to stop hiding, for creating a space where honesty mattered more than credentials, for teaching me that being visible doesn't have to mean being vulnerable to attack," he smiled, "and for the steady paycheck, that helps too." They laughed, the sound echoing in the empty dojo, and Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not accomplishment, not pride, not the satisfaction of being the best, just simple contentment. The knowledge that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she needed to do, with exactly the people she needed to do it with. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't going to win her any championships or attract any celebrity endorsements. But it was real. And real, she was learning, was enough. The weeks following the seminar brought changes that rippled outward in ways Lena couldn't have predicted. Martin Reeves called her 3 days later with a proposal that made her stomach flip. "I want to do this at my school in Portland. Not exactly the same, but the same spirit. Honest conversation about what we've lost and how to find it again. Will you and Evan come facilitate?" "Martin, I don't know if we're ready to—" "You're not ready. That's what makes it work. If you had all the answers, it would just be another lecture. But you're figuring it out in real time, and that's what people need to see. That masters don't have to be untouchable. That we can be honest about our struggles." Lena found herself agreeing before she'd fully processed what she was committing to. When she told Evan that evening, he looked simultaneously terrified and pleased. "Portland? That's a whole different city, a whole different group of people." "I know. We can say no. Martin would understand. Do you want to say no?" Lena thought about it. The old her would have said yes to avoid risk, to maintain control, to protect her carefully constructed image. The emerging her wanted to lean into the discomfort, to see where this path led. "No. I want to see if what happened here can happen somewhere else. I want to see if it was real or just a fluke." "It was real. But real is fragile. It doesn't always survive transplanting." "Then we'll find out together." Caleb was doing homework at his usual bench, but he looked up with interest. "Can I come?" "To Portland?" "Buddy, it's a school day." "But I learn more watching you teach than I do at school sometimes. And I could draw. Drawing is educational." Evan looked at Lena, a question in his eyes. She understood what he was asking. Was Caleb becoming too attached to this world? Was Evan letting his son get caught up in something that might not last? "He should come," Lena said. "His perspective matters. The drawings matter. And honestly, having him there reminds all of us that this isn't about impressing each other. It's about being real enough that a child can understand what we're saying." The Portland session happened 3 weeks later on a Saturday. Martin's school was smaller than Lena's, more intimate, located in a converted warehouse in the Pearl District. About 20 people showed up. A mix of Martin's senior students and a few other instructors from around the region who'd heard about the Seattle gathering. The format was the same. Lena opened with a question, this time, what did you sacrifice to become who you are, and was it worth it? The room went silent, people shifting uncomfortably, confronted with an accounting they'd been avoiding for years. A woman in her 50s spoke first. "I sacrificed my marriage. My husband couldn't understand why I needed to train 6 hours a day. Why tournaments and rank tests mattered more than date nights and vacations. He left after 10 years and I told myself it was his loss, that he didn't understand dedication." Her voice cracked. But sitting here now, I realize I'm a fourth Dan black belt and I'm completely alone. And I don't know if the trade was worth it. Others shared similar stories. Relationships ended, children grown distant, health compromised, financial security sacrificed for competition travel. Years spent chasing rank and recognition while life happened around them, unnoticed and unappreciated. Evan listened to all of it before speaking. I did the same thing. I sacrificed my marriage too, in a different way. I was physically present but emotionally absent. Training consumed me. My wife would try to talk to me about her day, and I'd be mentally rehearsing combinations. She'd want to go out, and I'd need to train. She loved me anyway, but I didn't give her the presents she deserved. He looked down at his hands. She died before I figured that out. I don't get to go back and make different choices. That's something I carry every day. How do you live with that? The woman asked. By making different choices now. By being present for my son in ways I wasn't present for his mother. By valuing connection over achievement. By measuring my days not by what I accomplished, but by how fully I showed up. He paused. And by forgiving myself when I fail at all of that, which is often. That sounds impossibly hard. It is. But it's real hard instead of fake easy. Fake easy is pretending that sacrificing everything for mastery is noble. Real hard is admitting you made choices that hurt people and choosing differently going forward. The conversation deepened from there, moving into territory that made everyone uncomfortable but also strangely relieved. These were conversations nobody had in martial arts spaces. Admissions of loneliness, regret, the dawning realization that perfection was a cage they'd built for themselves. During a break, Martin pulled Lena aside. This is going to sound strange, but I think Evan might be the most important teacher in American martial arts right now. He's not a teacher. He's a janitor who happens to have profound insights. That's what makes him important. He's not trying to build a following or maintain a brand. He's just honest about his experience. And in a world drowning in performance and pretense, honesty is revolutionary. You won't want to hear that. He barely agreed to come to Portland. I know, but someone needs to document this. What he's saying, what you're creating together, it matters. Document it how? I don't know yet, but we need to preserve it somehow before it gets lost or corrupted or turned into something commercial. Lena hadn't considered that possibility. She'd been so focused on her own transformation that she hadn't thought about the broader implications. But Martin was right. There was something happening here that transcended her personal journey. A movement, maybe, or at least a conversation that needed to continue. After the Portland session, 3 more schools reached out requesting similar gatherings. Lena had to start saying no. She still had her own dojo to run, her own students to teach, her own practice to maintain. And Evan had his actual job, his son to care for, his own life that existed outside of these intense philosophical discussions. But one invitation she couldn't refuse came from Susan Park, the master who'd attended the original Seattle seminar. Susan ran a program for at-risk youth in South Seattle, teaching martial arts as a way to build confidence and discipline. She wanted to know if Lena and Evan would come talk to her kids. They don't need to hear about technique, Susan explained. They get plenty of that from me, but they need to hear what you're teaching, that strength doesn't mean hardness, that discipline doesn't mean destroying yourself, that being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. Those are pretty advanced concepts for teenagers, Lena said. These kids have been through more than most adults. They can handle advanced concepts. What they can't handle is more adults pretending to have all the answers while obviously struggling themselves. Lena brought Evan and Caleb to Susan's program on a Thursday evening. About 15 kids, ages 13 to 17, sat on mats looking skeptical and guarded. They'd been told that some fancy billionaire master was coming to talk to them, and their body language screamed that they expected to be lectured by someone who didn't understand their lives. Lena opened with the truth. I'm going to be honest with you. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Susan invited me because she thinks I have something valuable to share. But looking at all of you, I'm realizing I'm probably going to learn more from you than you'll learn from me. Then why should we listen? A girl in the back asked. Not hostile, just direct. Good question. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should just let me and Evan answer your questions, and if nothing we say is useful, you can ignore all of it. Who's Evan? A boy asked. Evan raised his hand slightly. That's me. I clean floors at Ms. Hartley's dojo. Also trying to raise my kid and not completely mess him up. The kids looked confused. They'd expected another master, another authority figure. Instead, they got a janitor in jeans who admitted to struggling with basic parenting. "Why are you here if you're not a teacher?" the girl asked. "Because apparently I know some things that matter, even though I don't have fancy credentials. And because Caleb here," he gestured to his son, "thinks you guys might benefit from hearing that adults don't have everything figured out either." Caleb, sitting cross-legged with his sketchbook, looked up. "You all seem really tough, like you're protecting something important inside. My dad used to be like that. He says it's exhausting." The room went very quiet. These kids, who'd learned to armor themselves against a world that was often cruel and unfair, recognized themselves in that simple observation. "What happened to your dad?" a boy asked Caleb. "He stopped trying to be tough all the time. He cries sometimes now, but he's happier, sad happy, but that's better than numb tough." "Your dad cries?" The boy sounded incredulous. "Yeah, usually about my mom. She died when I was little. He misses her." Evan's face showed discomfort at his son's candor, but he didn't deny it. "Caleb's right. I spent years not crying, not feeling, not being present. I thought that made me strong. Really, it just made me disconnected." "My mom says men who cry are weak," a girl said. "My mom used to say that emotions were for people who couldn't handle reality," Evan replied. "Then reality hit me so hard I couldn't avoid emotions anymore. And I learned that feeling things doesn't make you weak, pretending you don't feel things while they eat you from inside. That's what actually destroys you." The conversation opened up from there. These kids, who'd been taught to be hard to survive, started asking questions about vulnerability and strength, about whether discipline meant self-destruction, about how to know the difference between protecting yourself and isolating yourself. Lena watched Evan with these teenagers and saw something she hadn't fully appreciated before. He wasn't wise because he'd figured everything out. He was wise because he was still actively figuring it out, and he was honest about the process. These kids didn't need someone to tell them how to be. They needed someone to show them that being was a continuous practice, full of mistakes and course corrections, and the courage to keep trying. After the session, Susan walked them to their cars. "Thank you. That was exactly what they needed." "I still don't know what we actually taught them," Lena said. "You taught them that strength has room for softness, that mastery includes admitting what you don't know, that adults they respect are still learning, still struggling, still human." Susan smiled. "That's everything." Driving home, Caleb fell asleep in the back seat. Evan and Lena sat in comfortable silence until Evan spoke. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "Your dojo, what it's becoming. It's not really an elite training center anymore." Lena felt her stomach tighten. "Is that a problem?" "No. But it's different than what you built it to be. Some of your students are leaving because they want traditional training. Your revenue is probably down because you're not attracting the high-paying clients who want to train with a champion." "All true. So what are you building instead?" Lena thought about it. "I don't know exactly. Something more honest, something that values presence over performance, something that doesn't pretend mastery means having all the answers." "That's not going to make you rich or famous." "I'm already rich, and fame is exhausting." She glanced at him. "What are you getting at?" "I'm getting at the fact that I'm still mopping your floors for minimum wage, while also being some kind of philosophical teacher to your students and anyone else who asks. And that's starting to feel unsustainable." Lena's heart dropped. "Are you quitting?" "No, I'm asking if there's a different arrangement we could make. One where I'm actually compensated for both the floors and the philosophy. Where I can stop working overnight maintenance at 2 other buildings just to make rent." "You work other buildings?" 3 total. Yours, an office complex, and a gym. I work about 50 hours a week for not enough money, and Caleb spends most of his evenings sitting on benches watching me clean. It's not sustainable long term." "Why didn't you say something?" "Because I'm used to making do. Used to not asking for things. Used to believing I don't deserve more than the minimum." Evan's voice was steady, but firm. "But watching you transform, watching you claim what you deserve and build something true, it's making me realize I deserve more too. Not because I'm special, Just because I'm human and I work hard and I have something to contribute. What do you want? I want to teach at your dojo. Officially. Not as a master or authority figure, just as someone who can help people explore presence and flow and what it means to practice from wholeness instead of fear. And I want to be paid enough that I can stop working 3 jobs and actually be present for my son. Oh, Lena felt something bloom in her chest, relief and joy, and the rightness of an idea she should have had weeks ago. Yes, absolutely yes. What would you need? Enough to cover rent and basic expenses. Health insurance for me and Caleb, and a schedule that lets me pick him up from school and be home for dinner. Done. You can start next week. Evan looked surprised. You don't need to think about it, check your budget, discuss it with your business manager. I don't need to think about it. This is the most obvious decision I've made in years. You've been teaching already. Now you'll just be compensated fairly for it. What will your established students think? The ones who are already uncomfortable with how much things have changed? The ones who can't handle change will leave. The ones who are ready to grow will stay. And we'll find new students who are looking for what we're actually offering now instead of what we used to be. You're risking everything you built? No, I'm finally building what I actually want instead of what I thought I was supposed to want. They pulled up to Evan's apartment building, and Lena saw it clearly for the first time. A modest 3-story structure in the Fremont neighborhood, nothing fancy, but clean and well-maintained. This was where Evan and Caleb lived, where they built their life, where they were whole despite having so little of what Lena had spent her life accumulating. Thank you, Evan said quietly, for seeing me, for valuing what I bring even though it doesn't look like traditional credentials. Thank you for teaching me the difference between achievement and fulfillment, between being the best and being real. Evan carried sleeping Caleb from the car. Lena watched them disappear into the building, father and son, the 2 people who'd accidentally saved her by showing her what she'd been missing. The next 6 months brought a complete transformation of the Hartley Institute. Lena officially brought Evan on as a teacher, which caused exactly the uproar she'd anticipated. 3 of her senior students left, offended that someone without formal rank or credentials was being given authority. 2 wrote negative reviews online, claiming the dojo had lost its standards. But something unexpected happened. For every student who left, 2 new ones arrived. People who'd heard about the seminar, about the honest conversations, about a space where mastery was being redefined. They came looking for something beyond technique, and they found it. Anna, the student who'd admitted to feeling guilty about joy, became one of Evan's most dedicated practitioners. She stopped measuring her progress by belt rank and started measuring it by presence and growth. Other students followed her lead. Michael, the tech executive, brought 3 colleagues who were all successful and miserable and searching for something real. They trained like they'd been starving and finally found food. Lena restructured her class offerings. Traditional technique classes in the mornings for students who wanted that. Exploration sessions in the evenings with Evan, focusing on flow and presence and honest practice. And once a month, an open conversation like the original seminar, where anyone could come and discuss what they were struggling with in their practice and their lives. The financial numbers were actually better than before. It turned out there was significant demand for honest martial arts instruction. People were tired of performance and pretense. They wanted truth, even if truth was messy and uncomfortable. Martin's Portland school implemented similar changes. Susan's youth program became a model for other community programs. The 3 masters from the original seminar each started incorporating more honest conversation into their teaching. It wasn't a revolution, but it was a shift, a small movement toward presence over performance. Caleb continued to draw, his sketchbooks filling with images of people in motion, people being real, people slowly removing their armor. Lena bought him premium art supplies and suggested he might want formal instruction someday. Caleb shrugged. I don't want to learn the right way to draw. I just want to draw what I see. That's fair, Lena said. Keep doing that. The moment that defined everything came on a Tuesday evening in October, 6 months after the original seminar. Lena was teaching a basics class when her assistant knocked on the door with an urgent expression. Lena, there's someone here to see you. He says it's important. Can it wait until after class? He says no. And honestly, you might want to handle this. Lena excused herself and found Marcus Chen standing in her lobby, looking exactly as he did in his social media posts. Expensive athletic wear, perfectly styled hair, the confident posture of someone used to being the most important person in any room. Marcus? Lena, you're looking well. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I heard about what you've been doing. The seminars, the changes to your program. Very interesting. What do you want? Direct. I appreciate that. I want to know why you've been subtly undermining me for the past 6 months. I haven't been thinking about you at all, actually. Really? Because everywhere I go, people are asking why Marcus Chen teaches Flash while others teach Substance. Why my instruction is performance while yours is real. Your little movement is damaging my brand. My movement isn't about you. It's about creating space for honest practice. And you just happened to start this right after I canceled my seminar here. That's quite a coincidence. Lena studied him. Up close, she could see what she'd missed in videos, the tightness around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the armor he wore that was even more elaborate than hers had been. He was terrified, not of her, but of irrelevance, of being exposed, of mattering less. Marcus, do you actually love martial arts? The question clearly surprised him. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Do you love the practice, the movement, the art itself? Or do you love being famous for it? I can love both. Can you? Or did one consume the other so gradually you didn't notice? I don't need a philosophy lecture from you, Lena. I came here to tell you to stop poisoning the well. Stop telling people my instruction is empty. I've never mentioned your name, not once. Not in any seminar or class or conversation. But you don't have to. The contrast is obvious. You're the master who became humble. I'm the celebrity who stayed shallow. That's the narrative. That's your narrative. I'm just trying to teach honestly. Marcus's composure cracked slightly. You know what? You're right. You didn't poison anything. I did it myself. I built everything on flash and charisma and looking impressive, and now people are starting to notice there's not much underneath. He laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is? I know I'm technically excellent. I've worked incredibly hard on my technique, but I've forgotten why any of it matters. I perform for cameras and crowds, and it feels empty, and I don't know how to get back to something real. Lena felt something shift. This wasn't an enemy. This was another person in armor, just as trapped as she'd been, maybe more so because his trap was public and profitable, and therefore impossible to escape without losing everything. Do you want to? She asked quietly. Want to what? Get back to something real. I don't even know what real would look like anymore. It would look like admitting you're lost, like asking for help, like being willing to be a beginner again in some ways while maintaining your expertise in others. That would destroy my brand. Probably, but it might save you. Marcus was quiet for a long time. There's someone here, isn't there? Someone who helped you figure this out. Yes. Can I meet them? Lena almost said no. Almost protected Evan from this man who'd humiliated him years ago. But then she remembered what Evan had said about not needing protection, about being responsible for his own presence. He's teaching right now, evening class. You can watch if you want, but you need to actually watch, not analyze, not judge. Just watch and see what you see. Marcus followed her to the observation window overlooking the main training floor. Inside, Evan was leading a class of about 12 students through what looked like slow-motion improvisation. People moving through space, around each other, responding to presence rather than attacking or defending. It looked nothing like traditional martial arts training. It looked like dance or meditation or play. That's it, Marcus said. That's the revolutionary teaching everyone's talking about? Watch, Lena said again. They watched for 15 minutes. Gradually, Marcus's expression changed from dismissive to confused to something that might have been hunger. These students weren't performing, they were present. Moving from real center, responding from awareness rather than rehearsed technique. It was simple and profound and utterly unlike anything Marcus taught. Who is that instructor? Marcus asked. His name is Evan Brooks. Marcus's head snapped around. The janitor? The teacher, though he still cleans the floors too. Some habits die hard. Huh? That's the same guy from the gym 5 years ago? Yes. Why is he here? Because I hired him. Because he knows things I needed to learn. And because he's a better teacher than anyone I've ever met, including myself. Marcus looked back at the class, watching Evan move among students with calm presence, offering gentle corrections that were more about awareness than technique. He humiliated me. No, he revealed you. You humiliated yourself. That's a distinction without a difference. It's the only distinction that matters. Evan didn't attack you. He didn't try to dominate you. He just made space and let your aggression exhaust itself. That's not humiliation. That's a mirror. Some mirror. It showed me I was an asshole. Were? Or are? Marcus smiled despite himself. Fair point. Probably still am, honestly. The class ended, students bowing and dispersing. Evan saw Lena at the observation window and started to head over, then stopped when he saw Marcus. His expression didn't change, but Lena could see the calculation happening, whether to engage or avoid, whether this was safe or dangerous. It's okay, Lena called through the glass. Come up. Evan climbed the stairs to the observation deck, his face carefully neutral. Marcus stood as he entered. Evan Brooks. It's been a while. Marcus. Evan's voice was steady. I'm surprised to see you here. I'm surprised to be here. Marcus looked uncomfortable but determined. I owe you an apology. What I did at that gym, humiliating you in front of everyone, that was cruel and petty and came from my own insecurity. I appreciate that. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm just saying I was wrong. I forgave you years ago, mostly because holding on to anger was exhausting, but thank you for saying it anyway. Marcus looked startled. Just like that? You forgive me? Just like that. What purpose would not forgiving you serve? It wouldn't change what happened. It would just keep me chained to it. That's very zen, also slightly infuriating in how reasonable it is. Despite everything, Evan smiled. Sorry about that. They stood in awkward silence until Lena spoke. Marcus was just watching your class. He had questions about what you're teaching. It's not really teaching, more like exploring together. That's what I'm trying to understand, Marcus said. How does that work? How do students progress without clear instruction and correction? They progress by learning to pay attention to their bodies, to each other, to the space between intention and action. Traditional instruction has value. I'm not saying it doesn't, but most people never learn to actually be present in their practice. They're always executing, never just being. So you're teaching meditation disguised as martial arts? I'm teaching presence through movement. Call it whatever you want. Marcus studied Evan with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. Why did you stop competing? You were good enough to be famous, to build what I've built. Because fame and goodness aren't the same thing. And I wanted to be present for my son more than I wanted to be recognized by strangers. Don't you miss it? The competition? The achievement? Sometimes. But I don't miss what I had to become to maintain it. The constant comparison, the fear of losing, the way everything became about status instead of practice. Evan looked directly at Marcus. Do you still love martial arts, or do you just love being famous for it? The same question Lena had asked, but landing differently coming from Evan. Marcus's face showed a flash of pain before he controlled it. I don't know anymore. It's all tangled up, the practice, the brand, the business, the social media. I can't separate what I love from what I'm obligated to perform. Then maybe it's time to stop performing for a while. See what's left when you take away the audience. That's terrifying. Yeah, growth usually is. Marcus turned to Lena. Can I train here? Not as a visiting celebrity, just as a student, someone trying to figure out what got lost along the way. Lena felt something profound settle into place. 6 months ago, she would have said no out of spite or protection or simple dislike. Now she understood that this was exactly the opportunity for transformation that she'd been given. Marcus was asking for the same chance she'd taken, to be a beginner again, to be lost and searching, to be real instead of impressive. Yes, but you need to understand the terms. No special treatment, no publicity, no using this for content. You show up, you practice, you do the work like everyone else. I can do that. And you might need to leave your ego at the door. Some of our newest students might be better at presence than you are. That's going to be uncomfortable. I'm already uncomfortable. What's a little more? Okay then, welcome to the dojo. Marcus started training the following week. Lena put him in Evan's evening exploration class, which meant Marcus Chen, 2 million Instagram followers, internationally recognized martial artist, celebrity instructor, spent his time doing slow-motion movement exercises with dental hygienists and accountants and college students who'd never heard of him. It was humbling in the best way. Caleb drew him in his second week, capturing Marcus in motion with all his technical perfection, but showing the rigidity underneath. When Caleb showed him the drawing, Marcus stared at it for a long time. I look like I'm made of concrete. You kind of are right now, but Dad says concrete can learn to be water if it wants to badly enough. Your dad is full of metaphors that are simultaneously profound and confusing. Yeah, but they're true. You just have to think about them for a while. Word got out eventually that Marcus Chen was training at the Hartley Institute. Some of his followers showed up, hoping to watch the celebrity train. Lena denied them entry. This was practice space, not performance space. Marcus seemed relieved. His social media presence started to shift. Instead of posting perfect technique videos, he started posting more honest content about struggle and growth. His follower count dropped by nearly 20%. His income probably dropped proportionally, but when Lena asked him if he regretted the changes, he shook his head. I'm sleeping better. That's worth more than followers. 3 months after Marcus started training, Evan invited him to co-teach a class. Marcus looked terrified. I don't know how to teach like you teach. So don't. Teach like you teach. But honestly this time, not performing, just sharing what you actually know. The class was remarkable. Marcus demonstrated perfect technique while Evan helped students understand presence. Marcus showed what excellence looked like, while Evan showed what awareness felt like. Together, they created something neither could create alone, the marriage of technical precision and present understanding. After class, Marcus approached Lena with an unusual request. I want to do a video about all this, about what I've learned here, about why I was wrong, but I want your permission first, and Evan's, because it will bring attention to this place, and I know that's not what you're building for. Lena looked at Evan, who shrugged. Your call. If you do it, Lena said carefully, you need to be completely honest. Not about us, about yourself, about what you lost and what you're trying to find, about the cost of fame and performance. Don't make us look like heroes who saved you. Make it about your own journey. I can do that. The video Marcus posted 2 weeks later was nothing like his usual content. 20 minutes of him sitting on his apartment floor, no special lighting, no editing tricks, just talking about losing himself in his brand, about the loneliness of being famous but not known, about finding teachers in unexpected places and learning that mastery might mean something different than he'd thought. He mentioned the Hartley Institute but didn't make it the focus. Mentioned Evan, but only as someone who taught me more by being present than I'd learned in years of competition. The video was raw and uncomfortable and deeply human. It got 500,000 views in the first week. The comments were split between people calling him brave and people calling him a sellout, but several comments stood out. I needed to hear this. This is the most real thing you've ever posted. Thank you for being honest. The video brought a wave of new students to the dojo, people searching for what Marcus had found. Lena had to hire 2 more instructors to handle the demand. She chose carefully, prioritizing people who valued presence over performance, who were willing to admit they were still learning, who could hold space for honest exploration instead of just demonstrating perfect technique. The Hartley Institute became something entirely different than what Lena had built 20 years ago. It was still rigorous. Students still learned technique and discipline. But now there was room for vulnerability too. Room for questions without immediate answers. Room for students to struggle and be supported rather than corrected into perfection. On a Saturday morning in early spring, exactly 1 year after the first seminar, Lena held another gathering. This time, 40 people showed up. Masters and students, the original attendees and newcomers who'd heard about what was happening here. They filled the dojo, sitting in circles on the mats, ready for honest conversation. Lena opened with gratitude. A year ago, I thought I knew what mastery meant. I was wrong, or not wrong exactly, incomplete. I'd learned how to be perfect. I hadn't learned how to be whole. And the difference between those two things is everything. Martin raised his hand. Can we talk about what this year has cost? Because I don't think we're being honest if we only talk about growth. There have been losses too. Absolutely. Who wants to start? Anna spoke first. I lost friends. People who trained with me for years got uncomfortable when I stopped caring about rank and competition. They thought I was giving up. They couldn't understand that I was actually finding something more valuable. Marcus went next. I lost income. A lot of income. My agent dropped me. Several sponsors ended their contracts. When you stop performing the way people expect, there are consequences. Do you regret it? Someone asked. Marcus considered. No, I regret that it was necessary. That we've built a martial arts culture where honesty costs you professionally, but I don't regret choosing substance over flash. Evan, sitting with Caleb as always, added his voice. I lost my invisibility. That might sound strange, but being invisible was safe. Nobody expected anything from me. Nobody judged me. When Lena asked me to step into visibility, to teach, to be seen, that was terrifying. Some days it still is. But you're happier, Caleb said. You smile more. You cry more too, but in a good way. Yeah, buddy, I'm happier, scared and happy at the same time. Lena listened to people share their losses and their gains, the complexity of transformation, the reality that growth meant sacrifice. But it was sacrifice chosen consciously, with open eyes, rather than sacrifice demanded by armor and fear. Susan Park, who'd brought her youth program students, spoke near the end. I want you all to know what this has meant for my kids. These teenagers who've had to be so hard to survive, they're learning they can be soft sometimes. That strength has room for tears. That discipline doesn't mean destroying yourself. 3 of them told me this week that this program saved their lives. Not because we taught them to fight, because we taught them how to be present in their own skin. The room fell silent, everyone understanding the profound weight of that statement. This wasn't just about better martial arts instruction. It was about teaching a different way of being human, one that valued wholeness over perfection, presence over performance, honest struggle over impressive facade. As the gathering wound down, people exchanged contact information and made plans to stay connected. The movement was growing, spreading to other cities, other schools, other teachers who were ready to question what they'd been taught about mastery. After everyone left, Lena stood in her dojo with Evan and Caleb, looking at the space that had been transformed by their presence. Do you think this will last? She asked. Or will it eventually get corrupted or commercialized or turned into another thing people perform instead of practice? Probably both, Evan said. Things grow and change. Some of what we're doing will be preserved, some will be lost. Some will be twisted into something we didn't intend. That's how movements work. That's unsatisfying. True things usually are. They don't give us the certainty we crave. Caleb had been drawing the gathering, his sketchbook filled with images of people in conversation, people being real, people slowly removing their armor. Now he held up a new drawing, the 3 of them standing together in the center of the mat, not in any martial arts stance, just standing, being present, being real. This is my favorite one, he said. Why? Lena asked. Because nobody's fighting. Nobody's trying to be impressive. You're just there, together. That's what everything was about, right? Learning how to just be there. Out of the mouths of babes, Lena thought, remembering Martin's comment a year ago. This 8-year-old understood what many adults spent lifetimes missing. That presence was the point. Not achievement, not recognition, not perfection. Just the practice of being fully alive in each moment, armored or not, scared or not, certain or not. Can I keep this one? Lena asked. Caleb nodded and tore the page carefully from his book. You should hang it where you see it every day, to remember. Lena took the drawing like the gift it was. She had a collection of Caleb's sketches now, documenting her transformation from armored master to emerging human. She kept them all in her office, a visual record of the journey from untouchable to real. That evening, after Evan had finished his cleaning, he still insisted on doing it himself, said it kept him grounded, Lena walked him and Caleb to their car. The Seattle sky was doing that thing it did in spring, painting clouds in shades of pink and gold, the day releasing into night with soft grace. "Thank you," Lena said, "for everything, for seeing me, for teaching me, for being patient while I slowly figured out what you knew from the beginning." "I didn't know anything from the beginning," Evan corrected gently. "I was just lost in a different direction than you were. We helped each other find a path forward." "That's generous." "It's true. You think you learned from me, but I learned from you too. You showed me I could be visible without being vulnerable to attack, that I could contribute without sacrificing my peace, that teaching didn't have to mean returning to competition and performance. We made a good team. We still do." Caleb, already buckled into the back seat, called out through the open window. "Ms. Hartley, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy now? Really happy? Not sad happy like Dad? Just happy?" Lena thought about it honestly. "I'm happier. I'm still figuring out what real happiness looks like. Still learning how to be present instead of perfect. But I'm not fighting with myself anymore. That's something." "That's everything," Caleb said seriously. "Fighting with yourself is the worst kind of fighting because you always lose." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been this wise. Adults just don't usually listen to kids." Evan laughed. "He's right about that. Come on, buddy. Time to go home." As they drove away, Lena stood in the parking lot watching taillights disappear into Seattle traffic. She thought about the girl she'd been at 20, just starting her martial arts journey, so hungry to prove herself, to be exceptional, to be untouchable. If she could go back and tell that girl anything, what would she say? Probably that untouchable wasn't the goal, that armor was expensive, that the thing she'd spent 20 years chasing wasn't the thing she actually needed, that somewhere in Seattle, a janitor with tired eyes and a wise son would teach her what her masters never could, that strength didn't require hardness, that mastery included not knowing, that being real was harder and more valuable than being perfect. But that girl wouldn't have listened. She'd had to learn it the hard way, through years of perfection that left her isolated and hollow. Had to build an empire before realizing empires were lonely. Had to become untouchable before understanding that being touched, by honest connection, by vulnerable conversation, by a child's drawing that saw through her armor, was what made life worth living. Lena walked back into her dojo, this space that was no longer just hers, but belonged to everyone who practiced presence here. She stood in the center of the mat where she'd first tried to hit Evan and failed, where she'd cried for the first time in years, where she'd learned to move without forcing, where she'd built something new from the ruins of perfect. The space held all of it, every transformation, every honest conversation, every moment of choosing real over impressive. And tomorrow, it would hold more. More students searching for presence, more masters willing to admit they were still learning, more children drawing truth, more ordinary moments of extraordinary teaching. Lena bowed to the empty dojo, a gesture of respect and gratitude. Then she turned off the lights and went home to her penthouse overlooking the city, carrying Caleb's latest drawing, ready for whatever came next. She was no longer the untouchable master. She was just Lena, scared and hopeful, struggling and growing, imperfect and whole. And that was enough. More than enough. That was everything.